Hello, curious minds, and welcome to Documentary for Sleep. If you're here tonight, it might be because your thoughts are still wandering, or maybe you just want something quiet and steady to drift along with. Either way, you've found a place to let your mind settle. Whether you're lying in bed, letting the day fade away, or listening while cooking, studying, or working late into the night, this is your pause, a space to slow down and step back into the long story of who we are. Tonight's journey isn't about fantasy or superheroes, but about something very real, the mystery of our own intelligence. Among the primates, our cousins, the chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos, humans stand apart. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest, but because of the way we think, imagine, and cooperate. This is soft science grounded in anthropology, archaeology, and evolutionary theory, not wild speculation. We don't pretend to have all the answers, but we do have the fossils, the tools, the cave paintings, and the questions they leave behind. And if you happen to drift off halfway through, that's perfectly fine. The story will still be here when you wake. I've left timestamps in the description so you can find your place again tomorrow, because this story is worth hearing from the beginning to the end. And if this kind of calm, long-form storytelling helps you learn, focus, or simply relax after a noisy day, consider liking this video and subscribing. It helps us reach more curious sapiens like you, who enjoy knowledge told gently. If you'd like to share, tell us how you listen. Are you in bed at home, commuting, or maybe working a quiet shift somewhere far away? And as always, stay curious, stay calm. The first sound is a cry, a sharp, wet gasp against a backdrop of agonized human effort. In that primal moment of arrival, a profound biological contradiction plays out. Why is this, the most natural of events, so perilously fraught for our species? The answer, it seems, is written in the silent, desperate negotiation between a mother's body and the child's most defining feature: an impossibly large head. We are born from a tight squeeze, a biological bottleneck that has shaped our very existence. The human brain, that magnificent organ of consciousness, is the largest among primates relative to our body size. To accommodate its rapid growth, a human infant must be born neurologically premature, a bundle of potential still half-baked compared to the more self-sufficient newborns of other mammals. Yet even in this unfinished state, the infant's skull is a formidable object, a globe of bone and promise that must navigate a passageway that has, over millennia, been narrowing. This is the price of our intellect, the first installment paid in the currency of pain and risk. The cradle of thought is also a vice. The fossil record whispers this ancient story of compromise. In our ancestor Homo erectus, we see the pivotal shifts. The pelvis restructuring, becoming a shallower, narrower bowl to optimize the mechanics of walking upright on two legs. This was a triumph for mobility, for crossing savannas and chasing horizons, but simultaneously, the cranium was expanding, the brain case swelling to hold a burgeoning mind. Evolution found itself caught between two masters: the demand for efficient locomotion and the imperative of greater intelligence. It could not fully satisfy both. The result was what anthropologists call the obstetric dilemma, a timeless tug-of-war where the victory of walking straight came with a new, inherent vulnerability in giving birth. The same bones that allowed us to stand and see the stars also made our entrance into the world a treacherous passage. In the modern world, we have seemingly engineered a solution to this ancient puzzle. The rising global rate of cesarean sections represents a profound decoupling of birth from its traditional biological constraints. We view it as a triumph of medicine, a liberation from a painful and sometimes deadly lottery. But this intervention invites a quieter, more philosophical question. In circumventing this evolutionary bottleneck, are we subtly redirecting the course of our own species? If the selective pressure of a narrow birth canal is removed, what then? Does this technological mastery represent a next step in human evolution, or does it create a new form of dependence, a silent pact where our biological design becomes ever more entwined with and reliant upon our own creations? Yet, this line of questioning itself leads to a deeper paradox. If such a costly, dangerous birth is such a disadvantage, why did evolution not simply select for smaller heads? Why endure this suffering? The answer must be that the prize was worth the peril. That large brain, so troublesome at birth, is not just an organ, it is a universe. It holds the capacity for language, for art, for empathy, for building civilizations and contemplating the void. It is the seat of everything we are and everything we might become. The struggle of birth is the opening act of a grander narrative, the first and most dramatic investment in a future of limitless potential. But this potential needed more than just a vessel. It needed a way to touch the world, to shape it, and be shaped in return. If the journey of the mind began with a cramped passage, its expression was waiting at the tips of our fingers. What world could a vast mind possibly build if it had no hands to build it with? A human hand, weathered and strong, cradles a river stone. The fingers, precise in their pressure, turn it over and over, reading its contours like a map. Then, a deliberate strike, a sharp, clean flake shears away. In that moment, with the creation of the first cutting tool, a new kind of intelligence is born, not in the silent darkness of the skull, but in the sun-warmed skin and flexing muscle of the hand. Why is it that our profound journey of the mind seems to have started not from a thought, but from a touch? The biological blueprint for this revolution is written in our very anatomy. The opposable thumb is not merely a feature, it is a declaration of possibility. This unique alignment allows for the power grip that can clutch a club and the precision grip that can thread a needle. It transforms our hands from mere instruments of locomotion into exquisite partners for the brain, capable of both brute force and breathtaking subtlety. Our nerve-rich fingertips became our first high-resolution sensors, sending a constant stream of texture, weight, and temperature back to a brain eager to learn. This tactile conversation, this endless loop of action and feedback, was the primal classroom where we first learned to shape our world. Could the very architecture of our hand be the cradle of our consciousness? This theory is etched in stone, buried in the ancient layers of our past. The Oldowan tools, simple sharp flakes struck from a core, appear in the archaeological record some 2.6 million years ago. They are not naturally occurring. They are the product of intention, of a mind that could see the potential blade hidden inside the unassuming rock. Their creator, Homo habilis, was even named the handy man. These tools mark a cognitive quantum leap, the ability to envision a future need and to plan the series of actions required to meet it. The hand was the chisel, but the mind was the sculptor beginning to awaken. With each strike, were they not also chipping away at the boundaries of their own understanding? And this ancient partnership did not end in the dust of prehistory. It thrives in our modern world. Every swipe on a smartphone screen is an extension of that primal gesture, a fingertip translating abstract thought into digital action. A surgeon's steady hand, an artist's brushstroke, a mechanic's intuitive twist of a wrench. These are all moments where complex cognition flows down the arm and into the world through the five-fingered portal of the hand. Our tools have become exponentially more complex, but the fundamental dialogue remains the same, a thought-seeking form through the dexterity of the hand. Is our technology, then, not just an extension of our mind, but of our body as well? Yet a question hangs in the air, unsettling this neat narrative. If clever hands alone are the spark of civilization, then what of our primate cousins? A chimpanzee will skillfully strip a twig and use it to fish for termites, a clear sign of tool use and problem solving. Their hands are capable, their actions deliberate, but they do not gather to build termite fishing schools. They do not refine their designs over generations, creating ever more efficient termite extraction devices. They do not paint the beauty of the termite mound on the wall of their nest. The dexterous hand is a powerful beginning, but it appears to be only the first chapter of a much longer story. It gave us the means to change the world, but did it give us the reason to change it together? There is a palpable silence that follows this realization. The clever chimp, for all its skill, remains largely mute. It can gesture, it can scream in alarm, but it cannot weave a story about the termites it caught yesterday or plan for the hunt it will attempt tomorrow. It has the hand to make a tool, but it lacks the tool to build an idea. It cannot share the map inside its head. So what is the missing element? What alchemy transformed grunts and gestures into a shared symphony of meaning? What is it that we have that allows the simple noise of breath to become a word, a story, a civilization? The sound is small, almost insignificant in the vast silence of the prehistoric world. A baby, held close, experiments with its breath and the new, strange instrument of its throat. Ma, ma. It is not a word, not yet. It is a vibration, a biological accident. But in that accident lies the seed of everything that will follow. Symphonies and lies, declarations of war and whispers of love. The entire architecture of human civilization built upon a single breathy exhalation. Why, of all the creatures on earth, did we alone learn to speak? The answer begins not in the mind, but in the body, in a subtle and dangerous evolutionary trade-off. Deep in our necks, the human larynx sits lower than that of any other primate. This descent, a gradual shift over millennia, created a longer vocal tract, a more resonant chamber. It granted us a gift of unparalleled acoustic flexibility, the ability to shape a single burst of air into a vast spectrum of vowels and consonants, the raw phonetics of poetry and physics. But this anatomical marvel came with a terrifying cost. This same pathway is our esophagus. The tube for song is also the tube for sustenance. It made us the only species on the planet that can and regularly does choke to death on its own food. Our voice, then, was born from a pact with mortality. Was the ability to sing and storytell worth the perpetual risk of a silent, suffocating end? This biological hardware needed an anchor, and we find its fossilized signature in the ghost of a throat long turned to stone. In a cave, nestled in the dirt beside the remains of an ancient fire, archaeologists unearthed the hyoid bone of a Homo heidelbergensis. This delicate, horseshoe-shaped bone, unique in its structure to humans, is the scaffolding for the tongue and larynx. Its presence, dating back over 500,000 years, tells a silent story. It whispers that this creature, our ancestor, possessed the physical capacity for nuanced speech. They could have gathered around that fire, their low larynxes humming with sounds that carried meaning beyond an immediate grunt of alarm or a cry of hunger. What stories did they tell in the flickering dark? Were they about the day's hunt, or something else, something unseen? In our modern world, we live inside the cathedral that voice built. Language is the operating system for human society, the invisible software that allows for the transmission of knowledge across generations. It is the reason we do not have to reinvent the wheel with each new birth. It allows a farmer to teach his child about soil, a physicist to build upon the equations of a long-dead genius, and a community to bind itself with shared laws and prayers. It is the loom on which we weave the very fabric of reality, from the most concrete fact to the most abstract thought. Without this shared code, could collective learning, the engine of our progress, ever have ignited? Yet, this presents a profound puzzle. If the spark of language was a mere biological adjustment, why does the rest of the animal kingdom remain trapped in silence? Our cousin, the chimpanzee, possesses a formidable brain. They use tools, teach their young complex skills, and navigate social hierarchies with cunning and excellent memory. They can grunt and scream with clear intent, but they cannot narrate, cannot lie, cannot describe the feeling of the morning sun on the leaves. They are brilliant, but they are mute to the world of stories. If intelligence and memory were enough, the forests would be filled with their debates and their epic poems. What crucial ingredient did we have that they lacked? Perhaps the power of speech was never just about the mechanics of sound. It was about the ability to use those sounds to craft things that are not physically there. A chimp can warn its troop of a lurking leopard, a fact anchored in the immediate, tangible world. But only a human can say, The spirit of the leopard watches from the mountain, and it is angry. This is not a statement about reality, but a creation of a new one. The true magic of the mouth may not be its ability to describe what is, but to bring into being what is not. And if that is the case, then the first word was not food or danger, but the name of a god. What is the weight of a word that creates a world? In the deep, silent dark of a cave, a hand reaches out. The flickering light from a small flame dances across the rough stone wall, casting long, shifting shadows. The fingers, stained with ochre and charcoal, trace the powerful, familiar curve of a bison's back. But then the line continues, flows, and changes. It merges into a form that is both beast and something else, something that stands on two legs, that possesses the quiet intensity of a human gaze within the body of a stag, a minotaur before the myth of the minotaur, a god or a spirit, or perhaps just a story, born in the flicker of fire and shadow. What impulse, what profound and necessary madness compelled that first artist to combine what is into something that could be? Was this not the first prophecy, the first act of seeing a world layered over our own? This act of creation, preserved for millennia in the caves of Chauvet and Lascaux, is far more than a prehistoric gallery. It is a birth certificate. It marks the moment we began to dissect the world not just with our hands, but with our minds, stitching together the fabric of reality with the thread of imagination. The biological stage for this revolution was set within the intricate folds of the human brain. Nestled behind our foreheads, the prefrontal cortex acts as a master weaver, a loom where separate threads are drawn together into a new and startling tapestry. It is here that a raw memory, the scent of rain on dry earth, the visceral fear of a predator's eyes glowing in the dark, collides with a surge of emotion and is then wrapped in a layer of metaphor. The lightning bolt is no longer just a sudden flash of energy. It becomes the angry throw of a powerful, unseen being. The river is not merely water flowing downhill. It is a serpentine spirit, both life-giver and potential destroyer. This neural alchemy transforms simple perception into potent symbol, allowing us to encode complex ideas about life, death, and our place within it all into a single, unforgettable image. The half-human, half-animal figure on the wall is not a failed drawing. It is a sophisticated equation, a compacted story containing questions of kinship, power, and the permeable boundary between the human and natural worlds. The archaeological record offers us the physical evidence of this mental leap. On the walls of those ancient French caves, dating back over 30,000 years, we find not just portraits of prey, but profound projections. The animals are often painted with a startling vitality, their muscles rippling under their hides, captured in mid-motion. But interspersed are these chimeric beings, therianthropes, who defy simple categorization. They are not attempts at realism, but rather attempts at meaning. This is the dawn of anthropomorphism, the instinct to project a human-like consciousness, intention, and agency onto the non-human world. It is a fundamental act of bridge building. If the thunder has a voice, then perhaps it can be pleaded with. If the hunt fails because a spirit is angered, then perhaps there is a ritual to appease it. By giving the chaotic and terrifying forces of nature a face and a form, however hybrid, our ancestors began the process of negotiation. They were building the first models of the universe, models where everything was interconnected and nothing happened without a reason, however obscure. This was the beginning of a search for causality that reached beyond the immediately visible. And this search, this need for a model, laid the deepest foundations for the world we inhabit today. The modern human mind is, in many ways, a palace built upon this prehistoric cave. The belief in entities that cannot be seen, divine watchers, ancestral spirits, the abstract force of karma or fate, provided the first binding social glue. These shared myths, these collectively agreed-upon fictions, enabled cooperation on a scale impossible for any other animal. They allowed strangers to trust each other based on a common belief in invisible rules and unseen punishers. From this wellspring flow the twin rivers of religion and law. The concept of a divine lawgiver, whose authority transcends any single chieftain, is a direct descendant of the spirit in the storm. The idea of a social contract, of rights and responsibilities that are intangible yet inviolable, is a secularized version of the same impulse. Our entire civilization rests on a bedrock of things we believe to be true, but can never truly prove in a laboratory: justice, equality, love, the sanctity of a promise. These are the sophisticated grandchildren of that first tentative belief in the bison man on the cave wall. Yet this glorious ascent of the imagination forces upon us a deeply unsettling paradox. Is this ability to believe in the unreal truly a mark of progress? To invest so deeply in a construct, to organize societies and wage wars over nuanced interpretations of something that, by its very definition, eludes empirical proof? Is this the pinnacle of reason, or its most catastrophic failure? We are the species that can envision a better future, but also the species that can be consumed by paranoid fantasies. The same mental machinery that produces breathtaking art and profound spiritual comfort also fabricates damaging superstitions, toxic conspiracy theories, and ideologies that justify unspeakable cruelty. We use stories to build bridges of understanding, but we also use them to build walls of hatred. The line between a unifying myth and a dangerous delusion is often perilously thin. Did this cognitive leap, for all the power it bestowed, also plant a permanent flaw in our reasoning, a vulnerability to believe what feels true over what is demonstrably real? Have we, in our quest for meaning, compromised our grip on truth? This internal contradiction is not a design flaw to be overcome. It is the very engine of our species. We are Homo sapiens, the wise hominid, not because we possess flawless logic, but precisely because we can hold reality and imagination in a constant, dynamic tension. Our wisdom lies in the ability to use the unreal to navigate the real. We are the animals who think about what does not yet exist: the next season, the afterlife, the invention, the dream of a fairer society. That image in the cave is the signature of this unique consciousness. It is the proof that we had begun to live not just in the world as it was presented to us, but in the worlds we could conceive and build within our minds. We became architects of the invisible, and in doing so, we began to reshape the visible world in its image. This profound flexibility of mind, this ability to bend and blend concepts, suggests a deeper truth about our cognition. It is not raw processing speed that sets us apart, but a different kind of agility altogether. If our brain isn't simply a faster engine, then what is the nature of its unique dance with the world? What does it mean to think? Not like a lightning bolt, but like a river, finding power not in sheer speed, but in an endless, adaptable, and creative flow. A simple puzzle appears before the chimpanzee and the human. A series of numbers, 1 through 9, flash on a screen for a fraction of a second before being masked by white squares. The task is not to remember the numbers, but to touch the squares in the correct ascending order. The human, confident in the supremacy of his intellect, focuses. The chimp, named Ayumu, does not seem to focus at all. His movements are a blur. When the results are tallied, the outcome is a quiet humiliation. The chimp wins, decisively. His short-term memory, his raw processing speed for this specific task, is simply superior. So, if our intelligence does not come from being faster, from a quicker processor, then where does it come from? What is the source of this profound, world-altering consciousness, if not sheer computational velocity? The immediate biological truth feels like a paradox. The human brain is, by mammalian standards, grotesquely large. It is a dense galaxy of nearly 90 billion neurons, each one a world with thousands of connections to its neighbors. Compared to our primate cousins, this organ is our most distinguishing feature, a bulbous crown of neural tissue. One might assume that such a magnificent structure operates at a higher clock speed, that the electrical impulses racing along our axons do so with a unique, blinding celerity. Yet, The cold data suggests otherwise. In tests of raw reaction time, visual processing, or short-term memory recall for discrete bits of information, we are often matched and sometimes bested by other creatures. A chimp's working memory can be startlingly efficient. A bird can solve a mechanical puzzle through rapid trial and error. A cat's nervous system is a masterpiece of predatory reflex, a trigger pulled without a conscious thought. Our biological hardware, for all its size, is not inherently faster. It is, in many ways, a ponderous thing. So what is all this extra matter for? If it is not an engine for speed, is it perhaps a library for depth, a device not for reacting to the world but for reconstructing it? The whispers from our deep past, etched into the fossilized skulls of early Homo sapiens, offer a clue. Paleoanthropologists pour liquid latex into the hollow cavities of ancient crania, creating casts of the space where a mind once lived. These endocasts are not maps of thought, but they are impressions of the container that shaped it. They show us not the software, but the hardware's architecture. What they reveal is not a uniform expansion, like a balloon inflating. Instead, the brain grew in specific regions, its landscape becoming more complex, more convoluted. The prefrontal cortex, that seat of executive function, swelled. The networks connecting the frontal and parietal lobes, the hubs for association and integration, became more dense. This was not an upgrade for faster reflexes. This was the slow physical evolution of a new capability, the power of sustained inner narrative. It was the development of a mental space where a stimulus did not have to immediately trigger a response. A rustle in the grass could be paused, considered, turned over in the mind. Was it the wind? A predator? Prey? This moment of hesitation, this costly delay, created a buffer between the world and our reaction to it. In that gap, consciousness was born. In that silence, we began to tell ourselves stories about what might be. This leads us to the modern understanding of our intelligence. It is not defined by how quickly we answer, but by how deeply we question. A computer can calculate pi to 1,000,000 digits in seconds, a task that would take a human a lifetime of tedious effort. But a human can wonder why the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter is a transcendental number that unfolds into infinity without repetition. Our genius lies in model building. We are not fast processors, we are compulsive architects of reality. We take the chaotic, sensory flood of the world and we impose structure upon it. We see patterns in the stars and weave them into constellations and myths. We observe the falling apple and intuit a force that binds the cosmos. We learn language not by memorizing a dictionary at speed, but by slowly, painstakingly building an internal grammar, a model of how sounds connect to meaning and meaning to truth. A child takes years to learn what a young animal learns in weeks, but what the child learns is a complex, fluid model of physics, psychology, and social nuance. We trade speed for depth. We sacrifice the immediate answer for the lasting understanding. Our intelligence is a slow-cooked meal, not a fast food snack. It is the profound, layered narrative, not the quick, flashing headline. This, however, presents a formidable evolutionary puzzle. If speed is so critical to survival in a wild, unforgiving world, the split-second difference between evading a predator or becoming its meal, then how did such a slow, deliberative, energy-intensive brain ever come to dominate? Imagine our early ancestor on the savannah, a deep thinker pondering the migratory patterns of antelope while a leopard explodes from the tall grass. The fast-reacting hominid lives, the philosopher becomes a statistic. A brain that pauses to model the world seems like a catastrophic liability in a realm governed by tooth and claw. Its advantages are long-term, planning for a season, inventing a better tool, coordinating a complex hunt, but its vulnerabilities are immediate and fatal. So, did this slow brain survive in spite of its nature or because of it? Was its very deliberateness, its ability to suppress the panic-driven reflex, the thing that allowed for the calm aim of a spear, the patient stalking of prey, the strategic feint that turns a predator into the prey? The slowness, it seems, was not a weakness to be overcome, but the very crucible in which our unique strength was forged. And so, we are left with a creature of fascinating contradiction, a being whose mind is not the fastest, but perhaps the most profound, a brain that prizes depth over speed, narrative over impulse. This magnificent, slow-thinking organ, however, comes at a terrifyingly high price. It is a luxury good in the economy of biology. To maintain this state of quiet revolution inside our skulls, to power this endless model building and storytelling, requires a constant raging fire of metabolism. It is an organ of immense greed, a glutton that consumes resources out of all proportion to its size. How can such a costly organ be sustained? What fierce evolutionary pressure would justify investing so much precious energy into something that does not directly help you run faster or fight harder, but merely to think? The answer lies not in the speed of its computations, but in the unique, extravagant, and wasteful way it burns. You are at rest. Your body is still. Your breath is calm. Yet, beneath the silent dome of your skull, a frenzy of activity is underway. An organ that constitutes a mere 2% of your body mass is, at this very moment of apparent idleness, consuming a staggering 20% of your body's energy. It is a metabolic paradox. While the rest of you rests, your brain feasts. This is the hidden cost of a quiet mind, the immense biological price tag for the privilege of thought. Why does this 3-pound universe of flesh demand such a royal share of our resources, and what does this relentless hunger tell us about who we are? On a purely biological level, the numbers are jarring. The human brain is, by weight, the most energy-expensive organ in the entire animal kingdom. Compare it to a fellow mammal of similar size. Their brain might claim a modest 5 to 10% of their metabolic budget. Ours commandeers a full fifth, and in young children that figure can rocket to nearly 2/3. This energy is not primarily for conscious thought. It is the baseline cost of simply being online. Millions of neurons are constantly firing, maintaining the intricate networks that hold your memories, regulate your heartbeat, and interpret the faintest whisper of light against your retina. It is a vast, silent city that never sleeps, its streets always humming with electrical traffic, its power grid forever glowing. This ceaseless activity requires a constant supply of fuel, delivered via a dense network of capillaries, making the brain a gluttonous sovereign sustained by a river of oxygen and glucose. What does it do with all this power, if not just to think? The archaeological record offers a tantalizing clue, etched in bone and the remnants of ancient fires. For millions of years, our hominid ancestors had brains not much larger than those of modern apes. Then, roughly 2 million years ago, a shift began. Brain size started to increase, an expansion that coincides compellingly with evidence of our ancestors' mastery of a transformative technology: fire. Cooking is a form of external digestion. By applying heat to food, we break down tough fibers and complex proteins before they even enter our bodies. This process unlocked vast stores of calories that were previously inaccessible or required exhausting amounts of energy to digest. The gut, itself a notoriously energy-hungry organ, could now shrink. The energy saved from maintaining a massive, labor-intensive digestive system was, in evolutionary terms, redirected. It became a surplus, a newfound capital for investment, and evolution, that most frugal of accountants, invested it in the one organ that promised the greatest returns: the brain. We traded the strength of a robust gut for the power of a complex mind. Was this the original Faustian bargain, trading physical simplicity for cognitive complexity? In our modern world, this ancient investment has compounded into a breathtakingly complex instrument. The contemporary human brain is not merely maintaining itself. It is running a relentless simulation of reality. It is a prediction machine, perpetually occupied with tasks that have little to do with the immediate present. While you sip coffee, a part of your mind is rehearsing a difficult conversation you might have later. While you walk down a street, it is subconsciously mapping routes, reading the intentions in a stranger's gait, and constructing scenarios of potential social interactions. It dwells in the past, replaying memories to learn from them. It projects itself into countless possible futures, imagining risks and crafting plans. This constant narrative weaving, this internal storytelling, is a breathtakingly expensive operation. Every imagined slight, every rehearsed victory, every moment of anxiety about an event that may never occur, burns real calories. Our consciousness is a theater that is always staging a play, and the cost of the production is a perpetual drain on our metabolic reserves. Is our greatest gift also a form of metabolic servitude, chaining us to a never-ending need for fuel to feed our own imaginations? This leads to a profound and unsettling evolutionary question. Is this extravagant energy consumption our supreme strength or our hidden vulnerability? On one hand, it is the engine of everything we have achieved. Art, science, culture, and civilization itself are the offspring of this metabolic extravagance. It allowed us to outthink predators, coordinate complex societies, and adapt to every environment on Earth not through physical strength, but through cognitive foresight. Yet it also made us fragile. This hungry brain tethers us to a constant need for high-quality nutrition. It forced our ancestors into a precarious existence where a failed hunt or a drought could starve not just the body, but the mind itself. In a crisis, the body will cannibalize itself to feed the brain's insistent demand, sacrificing muscle and organ tissue to keep the lights on in the cranial command center. Does this make our intelligence the ultimate adaptation, or an evolutionary gamble of breathtaking audacity, a high-stakes bet that has paid off brilliantly, but could just as easily have led to our extinction? The answer to this paradox, like so many things in neuroscience, is not found in a single answer, but in a unique structure. The key lies in the intricate architecture of the cerebral cortex, the crumpled blanket of tissue that defines our humanity. And within that cortex, one region stands out, a late-blooming addition in evolutionary terms that ballooned in size only in our own species. This is the prefrontal cortex, the seat of our most human attributes. It is the biological stage for planning, for moral reasoning, for the stifling of impulse, and for the projection of self into the future. Its expansion demanded an enormous increase in neural connectivity and metabolic activity. But what evolutionary pressure could have been so intense, so unrelenting, that it favored the development of such a costly and seemingly extravagant new module in the mind? What force sculpted this particular landscape of neurons and synapses, turning a mere brain into a human mind? The story of this energy-hungry organ is therefore incomplete. We have followed the river of calories to its destination, but we have yet to fully explore the unique city they power. We have measured the cost, but can we truly understand the value of what was purchased? The journey leads us inward, to the very front of the brain, to the quiet, deliberate voice that whispers of consequences and possibilities. This is the realm of the prefrontal cortex. Its sudden rise is the next chapter in our story, the explanation for how raw metabolic power was refined into conscious will. What was the catalyst that sparked the explosive growth of this cerebral frontier? And how did this new territory within ourselves fundamentally alter the equation of what it means to be human? You go to send the text, your thumb hovering over the glowing screen. Then you stop. A sudden vivid image flashes in your mind, the recipient's face crumbling in hurt, the awkward silence that would follow at dinner, the slow unraveling of a trust it took years to build. You delete the words. You craft a kinder, more thoughtful message instead. This quiet internal revolution, this act of choosing empathy over impulse, is not a simple whim. It is the sound of a specific part of you, a biological marvel that took eons to forge, finally speaking up. It is the voice of your prefrontal cortex. This region, the very front part of your brain, nestled right behind the forehead, is less a specific organ and more a vast humming command center. It is the seat of what we often call our highest self. While older, deeper brain regions scream for immediate gratification, eat that, fight that, flee from that, the prefrontal cortex is the calm, strategic planner in the quiet room. It is the architect of morality, the conductor of complex thought, the engine of imagination, and the ultimate suppressor of our most basic urges. It allows us to not just react to the world, but to envision a better version of it and then chart a course to get there. It is the biological cradle of our civility, our art, our science, and our profound capacity for regret and foresight. In the silent theater of the mind, it is the director who calls cut, rewinds the tape, and asks, "What if we tried it this way instead?" Biologically, the prefrontal cortex is a tapestry of intricate neural connections, a dense forest of cells that matures slower than any other part of our brain, well into our mid-20s. This slow burn of development is a clue to its immense complexity. It is not concerned with the raw, immediate data of the senses. Instead, it synthesizes. It takes the roaring river of information from the rest of the brain, the fear from the amygdala, the memories from the hippocampus, the pleasures from the reward system, and builds dams, creates canals, and redirects the flow. It is the mediator that allows you to feel a surge of anger, but choose a measured response. It is the source of that internal whisper that calculates consequences, that weighs a momentary pleasure against a long-term goal, that can imagine the feeling of pride after a hard workout and use that future emotion to overpower the present desire to stay on the couch. This thin layer of neural tissue is what separates a fleeting impulse from a deliberate act, a want from a will. We can trace the rise of this quiet commander back through the dust of millennia. The fossil record tells a slow, deliberate story of a brain reshaping itself. When we compare the endocasts, the internal molds of ancient skulls, of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, a subtle but monumental shift is evident. The cranium expands, not just overall, but specifically in the frontal region. This was not a random mutation. It was an evolutionary arms race of cognition. This gradual bulging of the brow coincided precisely with an explosion of behavioral complexity that archaeologists painstakingly pieced together. We begin to find not just sharper hand axes, but bone needles for sewing-fitted clothing, evidence of long-distance trade for exotic materials, and, perhaps most tellingly, the first signs of ritualistic burial. Imagine that scene. A group of early humans, their survival perpetually balanced on a knife's edge, taking precious time and energy to carefully inter one of their own. They placed tools beside the body, perhaps flowers or ochre pigment, gifts for a journey whose destination they could only imagine. This act is not pragmatic. It is not about hunger, fear, or immediate survival. It is an act woven from threads of empathy, belief in an unseen world, and a profound sense of future, a concept that simply cannot exist without a sophisticated prefrontal cortex. It is the moment the brain began to contemplate more than just the present. It began to wrestle with the abstract, with loss, and with the terrifying, beautiful question of what comes next. In our modern world, we take the products of this region for granted, yet they define every aspect of our civilized existence. Your ability to set an alarm for a 6 a.m. flight you booked 6 months in advance is a miracle of prefrontal function. You are sacrificing immediate comfort for a future gain, acting on a plan that exists only as a concept in your mind. The dull ache of guilt you feel after snapping at a loved one, the warm glow of pride after acting with integrity when no one was watching, the intricate 5-year plan for your career. These are all the whispers and shouts of the frontal lobe. It is the internal compass that orients us toward a North Star of our own making, a North Star built on ethics, consequences, and imagined futures. It is the reason we can write symphonies, build particle accelerators, and feel a moral obligation to strangers on the other side of the planet. And yet, for all its majestic power, this cradle of civilization also possesses a terrifying duality. It is the same organ that allows us to imagine peace that also designs the precise logistics of genocide. It is the same faculty that envisions economic prosperity that also engineers systems of exploitative greed and environmental destruction on a global scale. The prefrontal cortex did not eliminate our darker instincts. It simply made them more efficient, more calculating, and infinitely more scalable. It provides the moral framework, but it does not guarantee a moral outcome. It can be hijacked, its powerful ability to plan and imagine co-opted by the very baser impulses it is meant to control. We can rationally justify atrocities, imagine a future purified of those we deem undesirable, and coldly calculate the economic benefits of human suffering. So, we are left with a haunting paradox. Does this crowning glory of human evolution, this engine of our morality, truly make us more ethical? Or does it merely furnish us with more sophisticated tools to enact our ancient tribal cruelties? Perhaps the question is not about the power of this region alone, but about what it listens to. Its greatest strength is not control, but collaboration. It cannot build its castles in the air without raw material. It needs a partner, a co-conspirator in the grand project of human consciousness. For this rational governor to chart a course, it must first have a destination, a vision of something that is not yet real, a map of a world that exists only as a shimmering possibility in the mind's eye. Its true power is unlocked not in its ability to restrain, but in its ability to dream. And what is a dream, after all, but the ability to see what isn't there? You hold a piece of paper, flimsy and light. It's colored with intricate patterns in the face of a long-dead leader. By itself, it is nothing. It can start a fire or fold into a child's toy airplane. But you and I and everyone around us have agreed to see it as something else entirely. We call it money. We trade it for food, for shelter, for a piece of another person's life. This is the magic trick at the heart of humanity, the ability to see what isn't really there. An invisible idea, a shared fiction, commands the tangible world, directing the flow of concrete resources and human effort with the silent authority of a collective dream. This is the power of abstract thought, the capacity to paint with the colors of the mind, to grasp concepts that have no physical form, yet shape every facet of our material existence. This power begins not in the bank or the marketplace, but deep within the labyrinth of the human brain. It is a biological symphony, a feat of neural engineering. When you look at that piece of paper and see currency, a specific network of regions lights up like a city seen from space at night. The visual cortex registers the ink and fiber. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, accesses the rules we've all agreed upon, the value, the meaning. The limbic system, the ancient seat of emotion, might stir with feelings of security or anxiety based on the number printed there. This neural dance connects a sensory input, the sight of the paper, to a web of abstract associations: labor, value, trade, future possibility. It is a uniquely human concert. Other animals communicate danger or food, but they do not gather to trade shells they've deemed valuable, nor do they bury tokens they believe can be exchanged for an afterlife. Our brains are wired not just to perceive the world, but to overwrite it, to layer it with meaning that we ourselves have invented. What does it mean that our most profound social inventions are, at their core, just delicate patterns of electrical fire in the dark cavern of the skull? Long before the first coin was minted or the first stock market opened, our ancestors were practicing this art of seeing the unseen. The earliest evidence is not found in ledgers, but in the silent, cool darkness of ancient caves. On the walls of Lascaux or Chauvet, a handprint is not just a handprint, it is a signature, a cry of "I was here." A painting of a bison, stunning in its vitality, is more than a decoration. It is a symbol. It might represent a hope for a successful hunt, a story to be told, a deity to be thanked or appeased. Similarly, a shell necklace or an ochre-stained bead from a grave tens of thousands of years old speaks a silent language of symbolism. These were not merely beautiful objects. They were the first currencies of meaning. They were abstractions, stand-ins for status, for belief, for connection to a tribe or a spirit world. This was the dawn of what we might call abstract faith, the willingness to invest a part of one's reality into something that could not be eaten or used as a tool, but which was somehow even more important, The artist who painted by flickering firelight was building a world inside the world, a realm of ideas that would outlast every individual life. Can a symbol, born from one mind's abstraction, ever truly die if it finds a home in another? This human impulse to build with invisible bricks did not fade with the age of hunter-gatherers. It accelerated, becoming the very bedrock of our modern existence. Look around you now. The nation you belong to is a story, its borders agreed upon in treaties and wars, but invisible on the actual physical landscape. The law is a concept, a set of rules that we have all, silently or explicitly, consented to be bound by. A corporation is a powerful legal fiction. It can own property, sue, and be sued, yet you cannot touch it. It has no body, no soul. It exists only because we all believe it exists. These are all shared hallucinations, vast and intricate collaborative stories. They are the ultimate expression of abstract thought, allowing millions of strangers to cooperate with a common purpose, not because they know each other, but because they believe in the same concepts. Money, law, religion, society, they are the invisible architecture of our civilization, the scaffold upon which we hang our shared reality. We live inside a story we tell each other, a story so convincing we mistake it for the world itself. If we all stopped believing tomorrow, what would remain of these colossal structures? Would they vanish like a mist, leaving only the raw physical planet behind? Yet, for all its glory, this magnificent tool is a double-edged sword. The same neural machinery that allows us to conceive of justice, mercy, and a common good can also conjure phantoms of fear and division. Abstract thought is the wellspring of art and science, but it is also the factory of superstition and the conspiracy theory. It allows us to believe in things that unite us, but also in things that pit us against imagined enemies. The same process that links a piece of paper to the concept of value can link a harmless symbol to a malevolent force, or a different skin color to a threat. Our ability to see patterns and assign meaning is so powerful that it often operates even in the absence of a real pattern, creating connections where none exist. We are, it seems, meaning-making machines, and we cannot easily shut off the production line. This is the paradox of our cognition. The very thing that elevates us beyond mere survival also makes us vulnerable to collective delusion. We are blessed and cursed to see shapes in the clouds, and to sometimes mistake those shapes for gods or monsters. Is the price of our imagination a perpetual struggle against the ghosts it creates? And so, this incredible ability to hold an abstract idea in one's own mind had to find a way to escape its solitary confinement. It yearned to be shared, to be passed from one person to another, across rooms and across generations. The individual imagination, when woven together with others, becomes something even more potent. It becomes a collective memory. This is the next step in our journey, the natural progression from thinking alone to thinking together. For we are the only primates who do not just remember for ourselves, but who remember for our entire tribe, our entire species. We externalize our abstractions, giving them form in words, in paintings, in the written word. We build libraries not just of facts, but of feelings, of myths, of shared truths and shared errors. This is a capacity that a chimpanzee, for all its intelligence, does not possess. It may use a tool, but it does not write a manual for its use. It may feel grief, but it does not compose an elegy. We are the keepers of each other's stories. And so we must wonder, if a single mind imagining a world that isn't there is powerful, what is the weight, what is the consequence of a million minds dreaming the same dream? An old man sits by the fire, his face a landscape of wrinkles carved by time. His voice, a low rasp, begins to weave a tale not of his own life, but of his grandfather's, a story of a great drought, a journey across a parched land, and the discovery of a hidden spring that saved their people. A child listens, eyes wide, absorbing every word, every inflection of fear and eventual triumph. The old man will eventually pass into memory, and the child will grow old. But the story will not die. It will be told again, by the child now grown, to another wide-eyed listener by another fire. It lives, passed from one mind to another, a fragile yet enduring thread connecting the past to the future, the departed to the living. This act, this sacred transmission of experience, is a ritual that seems uniquely ours. A chimpanzee mother may teach her young to fish for termites with a stick, a practical skill for survival. But does she ever tell her daughter about the time the great old silverback, long since gone, led the troop to a fig tree that had not borne fruit in a generation? Does she recount the epic battle with the rival troop that happened 5 seasons past, describing the valor of a fallen cousin? Or is each generation born into a world of immediate, tangible needs with only the faintest ghost of a yesterday they never knew? This ability to construct and share complex narratives of the past hinges on a biological marvel deep within our skulls. While our brains share a fundamental blueprint with our chimpanzee cousins, ours have undergone a profound expansion and specialization, particularly in the regions that serve as the architects of memory. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure buried within the temporal lobe, acts as a master cartographer and librarian. In a chimpanzee, it is adept at mapping a territory and remembering the location of fruiting trees, a vital, present-tense skill. In a human, however, it has become something more. It works in concert with a vastly developed network of association cortices, regions that blend information from all our senses. This neural symphony allows us to do more than just remember a fact. It allows us to relive an event. We don't just recall that the hidden spring exists. We can almost feel the shocking cold of the water on that scorching day, hear the desperate, grateful gasps of the group, see the specific way the light dappled through the canopy onto the rock face. Our memory is not a filing cabinet. It is a time machine, rich with sensory detail and emotional resonance. This is the raw material of story. Is it possible that the very structure of our brain compels us to weave our disjointed recollections into a coherent plot, to find cause and effect, heroes and obstacles, even where there might be none? Long before the written word, perhaps even before language had found its full syntactic power, we were already externalizing these internal narratives. The caves of Lascaux are not merely shelters. They are silent cathedrals of memory. On those cold stone walls, under the flickering light of a tallow lamp, hands long turned to dust painted a breathtaking bestiary: thundering bison, graceful stags, enigmatic horses. This was more than decoration or a simple hunting manual. It was a collective memory rendered in ochre and charcoal. To stand before the majestic charging aurochs was to be connected to the individual who witnessed its power, to feel a shard of their awe and fear. The act of painting itself, the sharing of the image, transformed a personal, fleeting observation into a communal possession. It was a wordless story, a shared reference point that said, "This is part of our world. This is an animal that matters to us. Remember it." These symbols and images became the first anchors for a shared identity, a proto-history told not orally, but visually. Did the shaman who painted the great black bull also whisper a story of its spirit to the initiates, using the image as a focal point, thus weaving the first threads of oral tradition directly into the fabric of a communal space? This impulse to build a shared past accelerated with the advent of complex language. The oral tradition became the living library of our species. Epic poems like those of Homer, the genealogies of the Maori, the Dreamtime stories of indigenous Australians. These were not mere entertainment. They were the vessels of law, morality, history, and identity. They were the mechanisms by which a group could remember a migration that happened 1,000 years prior, or a flood that reshaped the land. Knowledge was no longer a solitary possession that died with its owner. It became a collective inheritance, passed down and subtly reshaped with each telling like a stone smoothed by countless hands. This evolved into the written word, then the printing press, and now the digital cloud. From folk tales warning children about the dangers of the dark woods to textbooks detailing the causes of world wars, we perform this extraordinary act continuously. We remember for others. We curate the past for the future. We build a collective consciousness that transcends any single lifetime. But in this very act of preservation, do we not also inevitably begin a process of distortion? For memory, whether individual or collective, is not a perfect recording. It is a reconstruction, and each reconstruction is vulnerable to the quiet erosion of time and the deliberate sculpting of desire. The story of the hidden spring, told and retold over generations, might slowly transform the grandfather from a desperate, lucky survivor into a prophetic leader guided by a vision. The enemy troop in the story might grow in size and ferocity with each telling. The cave paintings at Lascaux are powerful, but they represent only what the artists chose to depict, the triumphant hunt, not the day of empty-handed failure. Our shared narratives are often not archives, but mythologies. They emphasize what strengthens group cohesion and quietly forget what causes shame or dissonance. History, as it is passed down, is often written by the victors, but it is also edited by the needs of the present. A national myth, a founding story, can unite a people, but it can also bury uncomfortable truths under layers of celebratory narrative. So, is a collective memory a preservation of the past, or is it the first draft of its eventual transformation into legend? Does the very tool that allows us to remember across generations also destine us to never truly agree on what happened? And so, this profound ability defines us. It allows the idea to outlive its thinker, a story to outlive its teller. It binds us across centuries, allowing us to stand on the shoulders of every storyteller, elder, and historian who came before. We are not just individuals. We are nodes in a vast temporal network of shared narrative. This is the cradle of culture, of science, of law, of everything that builds upon the accumulated knowledge of the past. Yet this same cradle can become a club, used to enforce a single sanctioned version of the past. The memory lives on, encoded in words, rituals, and images, transmitted through the generations, a feat that seems to belong to humanity alone. But if our collective memory is both our greatest treasure and the source of our most enduring myths, can we ever truly know the weight of the past, or are we merely forever feeling its shadow, projected onto the wall of the present by the flickering flame of our own understanding? Perhaps the next layer of this mystery lies not in the stories we tell, but in the instrument that tells them. What is the nature of the teller? The two masses of tissue rest side by side on the cold steel table, dissected with a precision that feels both clinical and sacred. To the untrained eye, they are merely variations on a theme of gray and white. Two intricate sculptures carved by the same evolutionary hand. One belonged to a chimpanzee, a creature of immense intelligence and social complexity, the other to a human. They share almost everything: the same basic structures, the same neural pathways for hunger, fear, and curiosity. They are more alike than they are different. And yet, from these two remarkably similar organs sprang two entirely different worlds. One built intricate social bonds and used simple tools in the dense rainforest. The other built cathedrals, composed symphonies, and now contemplates its own origin on a slab of steel. The chasm between those two worlds is the deepest mystery of our existence. What invisible fault line, running through this familiar terrain of neurons and synapses, could possibly account for such a profound divergence? The most obvious answer is size, but it is a deceptive one. Yes, the human brain is larger, but this is a crude measurement, like judging the power of a library by the square footage of its building. The true difference lies not in the volume of the shelves, but in the wiring that connects them. Within the human brain, there is a higher proportion of white matter, the intricate web of insulated cables that allows distant regions to communicate with breathtaking speed. This is the brain's high-speed internet, a biological network that links the visual cortex, which sees a sunset, to the language centers that yearn to name its colors, and to the memory banks that recall a similar evening from years past. In a chimpanzee, the connections are more local, efficient for the immediate tasks of survival: finding food, recognizing a threat, navigating social rank. Our brain, however, is a constant, roaring symposium. A thought is never just a thought. It is a cascade of conversations between regions that, in other primates, might never speak. This neural chorus allows us to combine concepts, to see the tool not just as a rock for cracking nuts, but as a potential piece of a larger weapon, a symbol of status, or an object of art. Is our civilization, then, merely the product of superior biological bandwidth, a simple matter of more efficient neural logistics? The archaeological record offers us fragments of an answer, silent testimonies from a time before language. For millions of years, the toolkits of our hominin ancestors changed with a glacial slowness. A sharpened stone was a sharpened stone. Then, quite suddenly, the record erupts. We find evidence of multi-stage processing. A stone carefully shaped into a blade, which is then hafted to a shaft with resin and sinew, creating a composite tool that is more than the sum of its parts. This is not just tool use, it is a conceptual leap. It requires holding an abstract blueprint in the mind, executing a sequence of steps toward a future goal, and understanding the properties of different materials in relation to one another. Later come the cave paintings, the ochre-strewn graves, the tiny figurines. This is the birth of abstract thought, the ability to represent reality with a symbol. To see a painted bison and understand it is both a patch of pigment on a wall and the spirit of the great beast itself. The chimps' world is one of concrete reality. Our ancestors began to populate their world with ghosts and ideas, with past regrets and future hopes. Did this cognitive Big Bang occur because we finally developed the hardware to host such sophisticated software? Perhaps the most profound difference is not in how we manipulate the world, but in how we perceive each other. Scientists call it theory of mind or secondary consciousness. A chimpanzee knows itself. It recognizes its reflection and understands its own desires. But a human knows that you have a mind, too, with your own beliefs, desires, and knowledge, which may be different from our own. We are not only self-aware, we are socially aware to an obsessive degree. We constantly model the internal worlds of others. This ability is the bedrock of everything we call culture. It allows for pedagogy, not just imitation, but the intentional transfer of knowledge. It allows for complex language, which is essentially the act of transferring the contents of one mind into another. It is the foundation of morality, of empathy, of law, and of gossip. It is the reason we can collaborate on scales that dwarf any other species on the planet. We are haunted by the gaze of the other, perpetually wondering what they see when they look back at us. Could it be that this relentless, invisible social calculus, this dance of inferred intentions, is the true engine of our civilization? And yet, a stubborn question remains, a quiet voice of dissent against this neat narrative of biological superiority. If the secret to human ascendancy is solely contained within the unique wiring of our brains, then why did it take so long? The brain, with its enhanced white matter, its potential for symbolic thought and secondary consciousness, did not emerge in a vacuum. It evolved over millions of years, and for the vast majority of that time, its owners lived much like their chimpanzee cousins. They used simple tools, lived in small bands, and left no evidence of the explosive creativity that would later define our species. The hardware was there, or was at least being assembled, yet the software of civilization remained dormant for an achingly long epoch. This suggests that the brain alone is not the sole author of our destiny. It was a necessary instrument, but it required something else to make it sing. Was it a sudden genetic mutation? A final crucial upgrade? Was it an environmental pressure that forced a new kind of collaboration? Or was it something more elusive, a spark that jumped not between neurons, but between minds, igniting a chain reaction of shared ideas? We are left, then, with two brains on a table and a universe of difference between them. We can map the anatomical divergences, trace the explosion of cultural artifacts, and theorize about the inner world of self and other. We can tell a story of a brain that became so deeply connected to itself that it could finally connect with others in entirely new ways, building realities out of shared symbols and mutual understandings, But the timeline mocks our certainty. It whispers that possession of a magnificent tool does not guarantee its masterful use, so we must look beyond the brain itself, beyond the biological cradle, to the conditions that finally stirred this sleeping giant to wake and transform the world. If the difference was not in the fundamental hardware, then perhaps the true miracle was not the evolution of the brain, but the moment it found its voice. What unexpected chord had to be struck to turn a potential into a revolution? Imagine a simple test. Place a modern human, with all our accumulated knowledge, and a chimpanzee in the heart of an untamed jungle. Who would be more likely to thrive? The answer, stripped of our vanity, seems clear. The chimp knows the language of the forest, the meaning of a snapped twig, the scent of water on the wind, the hidden paths. We would be clumsy, frightened interlopers in its world. Our abstract intellect would be a poor tool against the immediate, concrete demands of survival. Now, reverse the experiment. Place them both in the center of a sprawling metropolis. Who built the skyscraper that scrapes the sky? Who laid the asphalt rivers that carry metal beasts? The chimp, for all its cleverness, could only ever be a visitor, an occupant of a world it cannot possibly comprehend or create. We, the hairless apes, are the architects. This paradox is the central mystery of our being. Are we merely thinking monkeys, or are we something else entirely? The answer, like a shadow, seems to solidify until you try to grasp it. The divergence begins not with a bang, but with a whisper in our very blueprint. At the genetic level, a subtle but profound shift set us on a different path. One of the most fascinating clues lies in a gene called SRGAP2C, a so-called human-specific gene duplicate. This genetic fragment acts like a biological brake, slowing down the development of our young. In other primates, the brain matures rapidly, wiring itself for the essential tasks of survival in a frighteningly short window. Their childhood is a brief, intense sprint. But in us, SRGAP2C applied the brakes. It extended our neural plasticity, stretching our childhood into a long, meandering journey of learning. This is our secret weapon, not a brain that is instantly brilliant, but one that remains open, malleable, and hungry for an impossibly long time. We are not born with more innate knowledge. We are born with the capacity to acquire vastly more of it. Our youth is not a period of mere growth, but of extensive education, a prolonged dance between a developing brain and a world it is desperate to understand. This delayed maturity is the cradle of culture, the biological prerequisite for everything from language to tool-making. What does it mean that our greatest evolutionary advantage is, essentially, a form of prolonged helplessness? This biological potential needed a social crucible to transform into something world-altering. The archaeological record offers a tantalizing glimpse into the moment this potential was realized. For a long time, we shared the planet with other thinking hominins, most notably the Neanderthals. They were not the brutish cavemen of caricature. They were strong, intelligent, and technologically sophisticated, crafting complex tools and mastering their environment. In many ways, they were better equipped for survival than our own Homo sapiens ancestors. Yet something different was brewing in our lineage. The evidence suggests that Homo sapiens began to exhibit a unique form of social flexibility. We learned to cooperate not just within small familiar kin groups, but in larger, more fluid tribes bound by something new: shared fiction. We began to create abstract concepts, myths of origin, spirits of nature, rituals for the dead. We started to paint symbols on cave walls, not merely as decoration, but as a means to transmit ideas across time. These shared beliefs acted as social glue, allowing strangers to recognize a common bond and work together towards a common goal on an unprecedented scale. Neanderthal society, for all its strengths, may have lacked this scalable, flexible cohesion. Their groups remained smaller, their traditions more localized. Our ability to believe in things that exist only in our collective imagination, gods, nations, laws, money, gave us a collective power no other creature has ever possessed. Is reality, then, ultimately a story we agree to tell each other? This leads to the third and most powerful layer of our knowledge, its cumulative nature. A single human, isolated from birth, is arguably less intelligent than a mature ape. Our genius is not individual. It is collective and accretive. We do not just learn, we inherit. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the previous one, not through genetic memory, but through the spoken word, the written text, the stored data. A physicist today understands the universe more deeply than Newton, not because her brain is inherently superior, but because she has access to everything Newton and Einstein and countless others ever figured out. This intergenerational leverage is the engine of civilization. It is a kind of compounding intellectual interest, turning small insights over millennia into the vast edifice of modern science and culture. We are the only species that has a history, a growing repository of knowledge that outlives its discoverers. Does this mean that a human mind is merely a temporary vessel for a culture's memory? A single node in a vast transgenerational network of thought? Yet this narrative of inevitable progress is haunted by a ghost. If our cognitive and social tools were so superior, why did Homo sapiens itself once teeter on the brink of extinction? Genetic studies suggest that around 70,000 years ago, our population may have shrunk to a few thousand breeding pairs, a tiny, fragile thread in the vast tapestry of life. We were an endangered species. Our fancy brains, our capacity for shared myth, our prolonged childhood, none of it was a guarantee against the harsh, indifferent forces of climate change, disease, or competition. Intelligence, it seems, is not a shield. It does not automatically confer survival. It is a tool, but a tool is only as useful as the hand that wields it and the environment in which it is used. This brush with oblivion is a humbling reminder. What is the value of a brilliant mind in a world that is simply hungry? Perhaps the turning point was not the brain alone, but the moment we learned to externalize its power. The first and most profound step in this journey was the harnessing of a wild, destructive force and turning it into a technology. The brain conceived the idea, but the hand had to learn to hold the spark. This leads us to the next chapter of our story, to the primal technology that truly began to rewrite our destiny. For the spark in the mind needed its physical counterpart to change the world. What if our first and greatest invention wasn't a tool, but a transformation, the capture of a piece of the sun's power here on Earth? The control of fire did not just mean warm caves and cooked food, though that was revolution enough. Cooking pre-digested our food, unlocking calories and nutrients that fueled the expansion of that very energy-hungry brain. It physically reshaped us, shortening our guts, and allowing metabolic resources to be diverted to neural development. But its impact ran deeper, altering the very rhythm of human life. Fire pushed back the darkness, carving out a sphere of safety and light from the terrifying, predator-filled night. It became a new, magnetic social center, extending the day and creating a space for conversation, storytelling, and bonding. Around the flickering flames, plans were hatched, knowledge was passed down, and the myths that bound us together were woven into the fabric of memory. The circle of firelight was the first classroom, the first theater, the first council chamber. It rewired our social patterns as surely as it altered our biology. This stolen piece of chaos, tamed and domesticated, became the foundation upon which all other technology would be built. It was the original open-ended innovation. So, did we master fire? Or did the mastery of fire, in turn, forge something new and unprecedented in us? A single spark leaps into the cold, indifferent darkness. It is a tiny, fleeting rebellion against the night, a brief, crackling defiance of the natural order. For the first time, a creature has not just sought shelter from the elements, but has commanded one. This was the original act of technological arrogance, the first time a human hand, or a proto-human hand, stole a fragment of the sun's power and told it to wait, to obey. This was not merely a tool for striking or cutting. This was a force of nature, domesticated. Why did this particular act of control, this taming of a wild and dangerous element, change absolutely everything? The answer is not found in the flame itself, but in the shadows it cast upon the faces huddled around it, and in the new spaces it carved out within the mind. On a purely biological level, fire began to reshape our very bodies from the inside out. Before the flame, sustenance was a brutal, time-consuming affair. Hours were spent each day chewing tough, fibrous roots and raw meat, the jaw muscles working relentlessly, the gut struggling to extract meager nutrients from its stubborn prize. It was a life lived on the edge of caloric bankruptcy. Then, accidentally at first, then with deliberate mastery, food was offered to the fire. Heat performed a kind of external alchemy, breaking down complex tissues and unlocking stores of energy that were previously inaccessible. The act of cooking predigested our food, gifting our bodies a sudden windfall of calories. This energy surplus did not just fuel muscles, it fed a hungry, evolving organ. The brain, that most gluttonous of tissues, consumed this new energy dividend and expanded. We were, quite literally, cooked into intelligence. The flame became an unseen womb, a metabolic forge that allowed for a new kind of creature to emerge, one whose potential was no longer limited by the sheer mechanics of digestion. This is not mere speculation. Deep within the earth, in the silent, dusty chambers of Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, the evidence lies buried in layers of ancient sediment. Here, archaeologists have sifted through the echoes of epochs and found not just stone tools, but something far more telling: flecks of ash, charred animal bones, and the distinct circular discoloration of sediment that can only mean a controlled hearth. These traces are 1,000,000 years old. 1,000,000 years. This was no fleeting, opportunistic use of a wildfire's leftovers. This was a repeated, organized behavior. It was a kitchen, a hearth, a home. The message from the past is clear and profound. Long before we were Homo sapiens, our ancestors were gathering, not just around a source of warmth, but around a technology. They were curating a living thing that could die if not fed, and could kill if not respected. This careful tending was a covenant, the first pact between intelligence and chaos. And so, around this hearth, the world shrank to the circle of its light and expanded into the infinity of the mind. The day, which had once ended with the sun, was now artificially extended. The night, a time of primal fear where predators owned the world, was pushed back. Within that fragile circle of light, safety was conjured. And in that safety, something unprecedented began to happen. The exhausting struggle for survival paused. With full stomachs and protected bodies, time itself seemed to loosen its grip. This was the cradle of culture. Faces, flickering in the orange glow, were no longer just kin. They were audiences. Hands gestured, not just in practical signs but in stories. Language may have found its rhythm here, in the space between the crackle of the flame and the silence of the stars. Myths were born from the dancing shadows. The first rituals, the first shared beliefs about what that fire represented. A spirit, a gift, a god. All coalesced in that shared, mesmerized gaze. The social bond was forged in that heat, stronger than any before it. But was this merely about survival? A more efficient way to achieve what any animal seeks: food, warmth, safety? To see it only as such is to miss the profound philosophical rupture. The control of fire was the first true act of alchemy. It transformed the inedible into the edible, the night into a new kind of day, fear into security, and idle time into the potential for thought. It was not just a light in the darkness. It was the original spark of consciousness, the first technology that reflected our own inner state back at us, capable of both creation and destruction, of comfort and terror. It forced upon us a duality we have never escaped. We are the caretakers of the very forces that can consume us. The flame was a mirror, and in it, we saw for the first time a glimpse of our own power and our own terrifying responsibility. So, did we master the fire, or did its constant hungry need for fuel and its ever-present threat of betrayal master us, carving into our psychology a permanent anxiety about control? For the true revolution of the flame was not just the light it gave off, but the darkness it created. By holding the night at bay, it carved out a new space in time, a pocket of existence that nature had not intended. The arduous, hours-long process of digestion was drastically shortened by cooked food. The relentless hunt for calories became marginally less relentless, and in that space, something extraordinary and utterly luxurious was born: free time. This was not idle time, but liberated time. Time that was not demanded by the immediate grunting needs of the body. It was this surplus, this cognitive windfall, that became the fertile ground where the seeds of art, philosophy, and science could first germinate. The body, no longer a full-time engine of processing, could rest, and the mind, finally off its leash, could begin to play. It could wander, wonder, and weave narratives. The hands that were no longer constantly preparing or chewing could begin to create, for creation's sake. So we are left to ponder this primordial paradox. We harnessed a wild, destructive force and turned it into the very cradle of our civilization. We used it to feed our bodies, and in doing so, we freed our minds to contemplate the universe. But in that act of domestication, did we also ignite an endless, insatiable hunger within ourselves, a hunger for more control, more energy, more transformation? The fire that warmed the first storytellers is the same fundamental force that drives our power grids today. We are still huddled around it, mesmerized by its power, telling ourselves stories about who we are. The question is no longer whether we can keep the flame alive, but whether we can ever understand the nature of the shadow it casts. If the controlled flame truly marked the dawn of the human mind, then does its flickering, uncertain light simply illuminate our wisdom? Or does it also reveal the long, dark shadow of our own hubris, stretching out behind us into the deep time from which we came? And if the first gift of this technology was the luxury of free time to think, what have we chosen to do with it? The fire crackles, a living thing in the center of the circle. It throws dancing shadows against the cave wall, a flickering puppet show of light and dark. Around it, a group of early humans sits, not sharpening spears, not scanning the horizon for danger, not even eating with the frantic urgency of the famished. Their meal is finished. For the first time in perhaps all of evolutionary history, their hands are empty. Their jaws are still. One of them leans back, looks up at the stars beginning to pierce the velvet sky, and begins to speak. This moment, this seemingly simple act of post-meal stillness, is one of the most radical revolutions our species ever experienced. It was not won on a battlefield or discovered in a lab, but was gifted to us by a simple, transformative act: cooking. The control of fire and the consumption of cooked food did more than fill our stomachs. It created the first and most precious luxury: spare time. Before the fire, existence was a relentless calculus of calories. A raw tuber, a piece of tough, uncooked meat. These required hours of chewing, a massive expenditure of jaw strength and time for a meager return of energy. The body was a furnace constantly starved of fuel, its primary occupation the search for the next log to burn. Then, we learned to pre-digest our food with flame. Heat breaks down complex proteins and collagen, softens fibrous plants, and unlocks stores of glucose that would otherwise pass through us undigested. This is a biological miracle. The act of cooking externalizes a part of the digestive process, freeing our bodies from the immense labor of breaking down raw nutrients. The time once spent chewing, hours each day, was suddenly given back. More crucially, this newly efficient energy transfer, particularly the steady supply of glucose, fed a ravenous organ within our skulls. The brain, that most gluttonous of tissues, began to feast on this surplus, its potential expanding in the warmth of the fire. We see this ancient bargain etched in the fossil record. Enter Homo erectus, the upright walker. They are the first of our lineage to show compelling evidence of mastering flame, and their bones tell a story of profound change. Their bodies shed the more ape-like proportions of their ancestors. Their posture straightened, allowing them to see farther across the savanna. But the most telling transformation is in their face. Their teeth grew smaller. Their massive, powerful jaw muscles, no longer needed to pulverize raw sustenance all day long, began to recede, allowing for the gradual reshaping of the skull, and perhaps even facilitating the complex musculature needed for finer speech. The fire had begun to sculpt us, not just from the outside in, but from the inside out. The time they gained was not a passive void. It was a new space for being, a cradle for a new kind of humanity. And in that cradle, what did we do with our newfound hours? We did not simply rest. This was the primordial incubator of culture. With full bellies and idle hands, we could gather not just for safety, but for society. Stories were woven around the flames, tales of the day's hunt that slowly morphed into myths of the spirit of the bison. Knowledge, once a fleeting thing, could be passed down from elder to child. How to find the best stone for a tool, which berries were poisonous, the meaning of a specific cloud formation. The rhythm of language could be practiced, its nuances explored beyond urgent barks of warning. Art was born in the flickering light, as fingers traced shapes in the ash, and the mind, no longer solely preoccupied with survival, could turn its immense processing power toward abstraction, symbolism, and wonder. This was the beginning of everything we call civilization. It started with a cooked meal and the quiet that followed. Yet, every revolution carries its shadow. This liberation from constant toil came with a hidden tax. In the frantic scramble for survival, there is little room for introspection. The mind is a tool focused on the immediate. Find food, avoid death. But in the quiet around the fire, the internal noise begins to rise. The time that allowed for storytelling also allowed for worrying. The mind that could plan for the next season could also dread its hardships. The same capacity that envisioned a successful hunt could also conjure visions of failure, of scarcity, of loss. For the first time, we had the leisure to contemplate not just the world around us, but the world within us, our fears, our desires, our place in a vast and inexplicable universe. Was this time a gift or a curse, a space for creativity or a cage for anxiety? The fire that warmed us and fed us also illuminated the darker corners of our own consciousness. And in that newly illuminated interior world, a profound new thought must have emerged, a thought impossible in the perpetual present of mere survival. As the group sat in their fire-lit circle, a member would have been missing. Their absence would have been a palpable thing, a silence where there was once sound. The raw, biological finality of death, common to all creatures, was no longer enough. The human mind, now rich with memory and narrative, could not accept such an abrupt and total erasure. The time and the mental space created by the cooked meal allowed for something unprecedented, not just to note a death, but to mark it, to remember, to feel the lingering shape of a presence that had vanished. This was the birth of a new kind of relationship, one that transcended the immediate and physical. It was in this space of leisure and thought that we first turned our minds not just to the living gathered around the flame, but to those who had left the circle forever. Why would a creature, so newly equipped with the gift of free time, choose to spend it dwelling on the departed? What profound need does this act of remembrance satisfy? Is it a duty to the dead, or a consolation for the living? A single body laid carefully in a shallow pit over 100,000 years ago. The soil, stained red with ochre, a color of life and blood against the earth's muted tones. Around it, the silent offerings, a handful of wildflowers, their pollen forever etched into the stone beside the skull. A stone tool, its edge still sharp, a final gift for a journey unseen. This grave, at a site like Kafza, is not a random act of disposal. It is a message sent across a vast chasm of time. It whispers of a profound and terrifying awareness, a question that begins to separate us from the rest of the living world. What do we do when a consciousness we know vanishes? Why are we seemingly alone among Earth's creatures, the species that buries its dead with ceremony? The weight of this question is immense, and its roots are not found in culture alone, but deep within the unique biology of our own minds. To mourn, one must first comprehend the finality of loss. This requires a triad of cognitive abilities that, as far as we can tell, coalesced only in Homo sapiens. First, an awareness of time, not just the present moment, but a linear procession of past, present, and a future that extends beyond our own existence. We can project ourselves backward into cherished memories and forward into an emptiness where someone used to be. Second, a developed theory of mind, the understanding that others have their own internal worlds, thoughts, and desires. The person in the grave is not just a still body. It is a repository of a lost universe of experience, a unique perspective that has been extinguished. Finally, complex emotion. Grief is not a simple reflex. It is a turbulent, enduring storm of sadness, longing, confusion, and love. Emotions powerful enough to compel us to act, to mark the passing in a way that feels meaningful. This biological constellation, time, empathy, and deep feeling, forms the cradle of ritual. It is the necessary but not sufficient precondition for turning a body into a memory. The silent stones and bones of archaeology offer a fragmented yet eloquent testimony to this dawn of mortality. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, the remains of a Neanderthal were discovered, surrounded by clumps of ancient pollen from yarrow, hollyhock, and groundsel. Flowers chosen not for sustenance, but perhaps for their color, their scent, their symbolism. Was this the first bouquet? A final gesture of care from a community that felt the sting of absence? Similarly, the early Homo sapiens at Kafse in the Levant placed deer antlers in the hands of the dead, or nestled a child's body close to the antlers of a giant fallow deer, a powerful and majestic offering. These are not the actions of creatures merely clearing away decay. They are ritualized, deliberate. They speak of a belief, or at least a hope, that something of the individual persists beyond the last breath, that the journey does not simply end in the cold, dark ground. The grave becomes a threshold, and the objects left behind are supplies for a voyage into the unknown. And from this threshold, modern human culture begins to flower in its most profound forms. Funeral rites are the birthplace of spirituality, the first tentative sketches of answers to the unbearable question of after. They reflect the formation of a belief in a soul, a non-corporeal essence that could travel to another world, a world of ancestors or spirits. This is not mere superstition. It is a monumental leap of the human imagination, an attempt to map the terra incognita of death. In doing so, these rituals also became the foundational bedrock of morality and community. To honor the dead is to affirm the value of the living. The shared act of mourning, the collective preparation of the body, the communal lament, the gathering, forges bonds stronger than blood. It creates a shared identity defined not just by life, but by a common relationship with loss. The rules of how to treat the dead inevitably become the rules of how to treat each other, the genesis of empathy codified into custom. The cemetery is, in a sense, the first true civic monument. Yet this great gift of memory comes with a sharp and enduring cost. Does the act of remembering, of ritualizing death, truly help us live better? Or does this profound awareness, this ability to project our consciousness into a future where we ourselves are absent, trap us in a unique and perpetual state of anxiety? We are the only animals who live with the constant, shadowy knowledge of our own inevitable end. This awareness can lend a precious urgency to life, a clarity of purpose. But it can also become a paralyzing dread, a specter that haunts our happiest moments. The same rituals designed to comfort can become obsessive. The same remembrance can curdle into an inability to let go, anchoring the living to the past. The community that gathers to mourn can also be the source of judgment, enforcing strict codes of grief, measuring love by the spectacle of its display. Is our deep consciousness of mortality the very thing that fuels our greatest art, our deepest loves, and our most driving ambitions? Or is it the original wound, a flaw in our design that we spend our lives trying and failing to bandage with ceremony and story? And so, to hold this anxiety at bay, to keep a community from fracturing under the weight of this shared dread, we had to invent something else. Something that seems, on its surface, frivolous and utterly irrational. We began to talk, not about urgent dangers or where to find food, but about things that did not exist. We crafted a social language of connection that transcended the grim facts of survival and death. We invented the tool that would allow 100 strangers to believe the same story, to share the same fear, and to find comfort in the same imagined future. But can a shared fiction, no matter how beautiful, ever truly console a conscious mind that knows the final, singular truth of its own ending? For when language created society, it gave us the ultimate tool for building worlds beyond the grave. Gossip, seemingly useless chatter, became the very mortar that allowed society to expand beyond kinship, to control and coalesce around shared beliefs. You lean in closer, your voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The story is about a neighbor, a small transgression, a curious habit observed behind half-drawn blinds. It feels like idle chatter, a mere morsel of social currency exchanged over a garden fence or a digital chat window. It seems trivial, a fleeting moment of connection or judgment. But beneath this mundane surface, something far more significant is occurring. You are not merely sharing information, you are laying the very bedrock of society itself. With every whispered implication, every shared assumption, you are participating in the ancient, invisible architecture that holds human groups together. This casual act of gossip is, in fact, a fundamental human technology, one that has, for millennia, determined who belongs, who is trusted, and what rules we all agree to live by. Our biological wiring reveals the deep-seated origins of this phenomenon. The human brain possesses a unique and exquisite sensitivity to social cues, a specialization that sets us apart from even our closest primate relatives. While a chimpanzee might understand a direct threat or an offer of food, it remains largely oblivious to the subtle symphony of social signals that humans constantly broadcast and receive. We are attuned to the slight raise of an eyebrow that signals doubt, the micro-inflection in a voice that betrays anxiety, the hidden meaning nestled between the lines of a simple sentence. Our neural circuitry lights up in response to gossip, not as meaningless noise, but as vital data. This information is processed not just for its factual content, but for its social weight. What does this say about the speaker's allegiances? How does this reshape the reputation of the subject? This neurological appetite for social narrative is the foundational clay. It is the primal urge to know our place in the tribe, to map the ever-shifting landscape of alliances and threats. It is the reason a piece of salacious news feels more urgent than a dry statistic. One speaks to survival in a concrete world, the other to survival in the intricate, abstract world of people. Archaeology provides the next layer of evidence, showing us the moment this biological capacity was pressed into service to build something larger. For small bands of early humans, where everyone knew everyone else, social cohesion could be maintained through direct observation and personal bonds. But as groups grew beyond the magical number of 150 or so individuals, the supposed Dunbar's number limit for stable relationships based on personal contact, a crisis of trust emerged. How could you know the character of someone you rarely interacted with? How could the rules of the group be enforced when not everyone was watching? Language emerged as the ultimate social adhesive and tool of control. It was no longer just for pointing out predators or coordinating a hunt. It became the medium for sharing judgments, for reinforcing norms, and for building a shared identity that transcended the immediate family. Through spoken stories, rituals, and laws, language began to codify belief. It allowed a group to agree, collectively, on what was true, what was valuable, and what was forbidden. The shared narrative, passed from mouth to ear, became more powerful than any single chieftain's command. It was an invisible fence, built not of wood or stone, but of words that defined the boundaries of the community and kept its members in check. Could the great ancient civilizations with their laws and their gods have ever been built without this gossamer thread of shared talk? In our modern world, this ancient tool has simply found new, exponentially powerful amplifiers. Water cooler gossip, tabloid headlines, and the endless scroll of social media feeds are not degenerate forms of communication. They are the direct descendants of those primordial campfire conversations. They are all mechanisms of social language, serving the same core function: to share information far beyond our personal reach and to construct a collective faith. A viral tweet, a trending news story, a widely shared moral outrage. These are the rituals through which we now build and reinforce our shared realities. They allow millions of strangers to feel they are part of a single community, united by a common belief in a fact, a cause, or a celebrity. They create the collective faith necessary for a nation to function, for a market to have confidence, for a social movement to gain momentum. We are, in a sense, still that small tribe, huddled together and whispering about the world beyond the firelight. Only now our tribe numbers in the billions and our firelight is the glow of a screen. But if this tool is so powerful for building unity, why does it so often feel like it is tearing us apart? This is the inherent paradox, the necessary counterpoint. The very same language that can weave a community together with threads of shared belief can also, with terrifying efficiency, unravel it. The same neurological machinery that hungers for social information is equally susceptible to misinformation. The same narratives that build trust in one group can be used to designate another group as untrustworthy, dangerous, or less than human. The gossip that bonds your circle simultaneously excludes the subject of the gossip and those outside your circle. The collective faith that unites a nation can just as easily be weaponized against another. The words that build a cradle of belonging can be sharpened into a club for ostracization. The tool of social cohesion is, inevitably, a tool of social division. For every us it creates, must it also invent a them? This duality forces us to look deeper, to the very source of these narratives. It pushes us from the social world of language into the private, mysterious world of the mind that generates it. This is the realm of imagination, the incredible faculty that allows a single brain to conjure entire universes from nothing. It is the engine of our art, our innovation, and our deepest empathy. Yet, this same beautiful capacity is the wellspring of our most profound fears. The same brain that composes a sonnet can meticulously construct a devastating conspiracy theory. The same mind that can imagine a future of peace and prosperity can also imagine 1,000 unseen threats lurking in the shadows. Our intelligence, which allows us to model the world with such complexity, seems powerless against the primal, visceral force of an invisible fear that our own imagination has manufactured. Why does our greatest gift so often feel like a treacherous double agent, working simultaneously for our salvation and our downfall? What does it say about us that the same spark that lights our way can also start the fire that consumes everything? A poet sits in a quiet room, weaving words of love and longing. The lines are born from a place of deep empathy, a profound ability to imagine another's heart, to feel a joy that is not yet real, to give form to a future built on affection. In another room, a different person types furiously. They are connecting invisible dots, tracing patterns of power and control, building a narrative of hidden malevolence. They too are using imagination, a profound capacity to project what is not immediately present, to construct a reality that exists only in the mind. One creates a bridge of connection, the other, a fortress of fear. The same magnificent faculty, the same spark within the human skull, yet it produces both salves and weapons. This is the double-edged sword of imagination, our greatest gift and our most perilous flaw. The biological roots of this paradox are buried deep within the ancient architecture of our brains. Neuroscience reveals that the cradle of imagination, a network centered around the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, is intimately entwined with the neural pathways that process fear and anxiety. This is no mere coincidence of geography. It is a functional marriage forged in the fires of survival. Imagination, at its core, is the ability to run a simulation, to project ourselves forward in time and say, "What if?" For our ancestors on the savannah, this was a vital tool. The ability to imagine a predator lurking in the tall grass, to vividly simulate the outcome of a misplaced step, conferred a tremendous advantage. The brain that could conjure the most terrifying possibilities was the brain that lived to see another day. But this survival mechanism, unmoored from immediate physical danger, can turn inward and become a tyrant. The same process that allows a composer to hear a symphony before a single note is played allows an anxious mind to vividly simulate social ruin, financial collapse, or impending illness. The brain does not distinguish, at a fundamental level, between a vividly imagined threat and a real one. The stress hormones flood the body, the heart rate quickens, the muscles tense, all in response to a phantom, a story the mind is telling itself. The what if becomes a terrifying reality within the body's own chemistry. So, is our capacity for wonder biologically hardwired to a capacity for dread? Does the very engine that drives us to explore the cosmos also force us to stare into the abyss we imagine in the shadows of our own homes? This internal conflict is not new. It is etched into the oldest artifacts of our species. Archaeology provides a silent testimony to imagination's dual nature. On the walls of dark caves, our ancestors painted creatures of breathtaking beauty and visceral power. Bison, horses, lions, rendered with an observational genius that still stirs the soul. This was imagination in the service of understanding, of capturing the essence of the world, perhaps of harnessing it. Yet in the same breath, the archaeological record shows us something else, the birth of the fantastic. We find chimerical figures, half human and half beast, spirit animals, and the first inklings of deities. Here, imagination was used to explain the unexplainable, the fury of a storm, the mystery of death, the fortune of the hunt. It built the foundations of belief, of cosmology, and of community. It allowed humans to imagine a world governed by invisible forces, to find patterns and meanings in a chaotic universe. This was a monumental leap, the genesis of culture itself. But woven into that same tapestry is the thread of superstition, the belief in omens, the fear of curses, the sacrifice to appease an imagined wrath. The same faculty that crafted a creation myth to unite a tribe could also justify a scapegoat to be cast out. Imagination gave us the tools to build collective meaning, but it also provided the blueprint for our deepest prejudices and irrational fears. Did these early humans, in their quest to make sense of the stars, simply create new shadows to be afraid of? The modern world, for all its gleaming technology, has not resolved this ancient tension. It has simply amplified it to a deafening volume. Our brain hasn't changed, but the world it must navigate has become exponentially more complex. Today, imagination is the engine of our civilization. It is the scientist visualizing the structure of a molecule, the engineer dreaming of a bridge, the artist challenging our perceptions. It landed us on the moon and decoded the genome. This is imagination as a tool of exquisite precision, building verified knowledge piece by piece. Yet, operating on the very same neurological hardware is the production of mass delusion. The internet, a product of immense imaginative power, becomes a petri dish for its darkest manifestations. Fake news, conspiracy theories, and algorithmic echo chambers are not merely lies. They are collaborative works of imagination. They require individuals to actively construct and believe in an alternate reality, to connect random events into a sinister plot, to imagine a level of coordination and malice that is as creatively staggering as it is factually unmoored. From the sublime beauty of a symphony to the terrifying paranoia of a hoax, the human brain is capable of producing both. It can generate profound truth and immersive illusion using the same cognitive machinery. So where do we draw the line? Is there even a clear line? Or are truth and fiction simply two different stories we choose to tell, both products of the same restless, simulating mind? This leads to an unsettling, almost paradoxical thought. Are we, as a species, too intelligent for our own good? Has our intellect, so powerful and precise, outpaced the simple needs of survival it was originally meant to serve? Our ancient brain, with its fear-based imagination, was designed to keep us safe from lions and rival clans. It was not designed to grapple with the existential terror of climate change, the abstract anxiety of nuclear codes, or the psychological warfare of social media algorithms. We are using a tool honed for the immediate and the tangible to navigate a world of overwhelming abstraction and global interconnection. The result is a peculiar kind of suffering, a mental anguish generated not by a present threat, but by our own unparalleled ability to imagine every possible future catastrophe. We are haunted by phantoms of our own creation. Perhaps this is the new, unintended stage of our evolution. We have long passed the point where natural selection concerns itself only with our physical survival. We have now entered a phase where the evolution of our consciousness, of our ability to manage the very power of our own minds, is the primary challenge. We wield the power of gods to imagine and create worlds with the fearful and tribal psychology of primates. We have built the telescope to see the birth of stars and then used the same creative impulse to build prisons of conspiracy in our own heads. The question is no longer about what we can imagine, but whether we can learn to wield this double-edged sword without cutting ourselves apart. Have we, in our ascent, created a universe of thought so vast and complex that we are now its prisoners, forever tracing and retracing the patterns of our own magnificent, terrifying creations? A single telescope, a delicate lattice of metal and glass, points its eye toward the void. It drifts in the silent sunlit chill beyond our atmosphere, built to capture photons that began their journey when the Earth itself was still a formless dream. This intricate machine, capable of mapping the infant universe, was designed, built, and launched by an animal whose ancestors once huddled for warmth in caves, their world limited to the distance they could walk and the things they could touch. This staggering leap, from a handprint on a damp wall to a digital echo of the cosmic microwave background, forces a peculiar and humbling question upon us. Has our intellect, this magnificent and terrifying tool, surged far beyond the original specifications for survival? Are we a species equipped with a cognitive Lamborghini, yet still navigating the dusty, prehistoric paths of our own making? From a purely biological standpoint, the case for extreme intelligence as a necessary evolutionary advantage is surprisingly thin. Life, in its breathtaking diversity, is a testament to a million other solutions to the problem of existence. The scorpion, with its ancient neural circuitry, has outlasted empires, its success written not in treatises, but in a venomous sting and an exquisite tolerance for desolation. The great white shark is a perfect engine of consumption, its mind a razor-focused instrument for tracking the electrical thrum of prey, unburdened by the existential dread of its own purpose. A bacterium, with no mind at all, thrives in boiling vents and frozen wastes, its replication a silent, triumphant scream against the universe's indifference. Theirs is a wisdom of pure adaptation, a flawless integration with a niche. They simply are. They do not need to ask why they are. For 3 billion years, the kingdom of life prospered without a single philosopher, a single artist, or a single engineer. Instinct, it seems, is a more than sufficient operating system for perpetuating DNA. So why did our branch of the primate family tree embark on such a costly, energy-intensive, and seemingly superfluous neurological arms race? Was it truly to outsmart the predator, or track the migrating herd? Or was it for something else, something brewing in the deep, dark theaters of our own emerging consciousness? If we dig into the layers of our own past, the plot only thickens. The archaeological record reveals a curious discontinuity. The first stone tools, the sharpened flakes and pounding cores, fit neatly into a narrative of survival, better butchery, better defense. But then, something breaks. We find ochre crayons used to adorn skin and cave wall. We unearth a delicate bone flute, its notes long since evaporated, but its purpose clear, not to fill a belly, but to fill a silence. We stare up at the monumental architecture of Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex built by hunter-gatherers, a project that would have required coordination and abstract belief on a staggering scale, all before the invention of agriculture. Mathematics, astronomy, narrative. These inventions did not emerge from the desperate clutch for survival. They bloomed from an internal pressure, a need to impose order on chaos, to find pattern in the randomness of weather and stars, to scream meaning into the void and listen for an echo. This was the birth of what we might call useless knowledge, the understanding of things that have no immediate, practical application to finding food or avoiding death. It was the first signature of a mind that had begun to interrogate its own reality, a mind that could not just see the world, but could also see itself seeing it. And in that dizzying loop of self-awareness, a new hunger was born. This hunger now defines our modern world, a world we have built in the image of our own overflowing minds. We have spun out the threads of our internal compulsions into a global tapestry of science, religion, art, and technology. We have split the atom, sequenced the genome, and woven a digital nervous system around the entire planet. We compose concertos and write code that can dream. Yet this very same engine of genius is also the factory of our unique sufferings. Our powerful prefrontal cortex, capable of modeling the future, does not only plan for harvest, it also conjures phantoms of lack, spinning endless scenarios of failure and loss. We are the only animal that can be psychologically crippled by a memory or terrified by a future that exists only as a synaptic ghost. The same cognitive capacity that allows us to conceive of love, beauty, and justice also allows us to conceive of shame, anxiety, and a profound, crushing existential loneliness. We hold the entire universe in our minds, and with it, the terrifying knowledge of our own fleeting insignificance within it. Our intelligence gifted us the Sistine Chapel, but it also gifted us the panic attack. So, we must ask, is this magnificent mind a flawless adaptation, or is it something more fragile, more paradoxical? Could it be that our greatest strength is also our original sin? This line of thought leads to a radical and unsettling possibility. What if human intelligence is not the pinnacle of evolutionary design, but a glorious runaway accident, a fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate mutation that supercharged a particular set of cognitive modules, setting off a chain reaction with no off switch? In this view, our intellect is a tool of immense power, but one that was never beta tested for long-term compatibility with the animal that wields it. We are creatures of visceral instinct and deep emotion, now piloting a consciousness of galactic abstraction. The dissonance is built in. We crave meaning in a universe that may operate with a cold, mechanical indifference. We seek permanence in a reality of constant flux. This accident allowed us to conquer the planet, but in doing so, it disconnected us from the very world that shaped us, leaving us alienated in a cage of our own making, peering out through bars of concepts and symbols we ourselves invented. Is our relentless, churning creativity merely the symptom of a system operating far outside its design parameters, trying to make sense of its own excessive output? And sometimes, in our quietest moments, this magnificent, burdensome intellect turns its gaze inward, and we are faced with a feeling so uniquely human, so utterly absent from the rest of the natural world. It is not fear, not anger, but a more complex and subtle ache. It is the hot flush of self-awareness curdling into self-judgment, the profound discomfort of being seen, and worse, of seeing ourselves through the imagined eyes of others, The chimpanzee may feel rage or joy, but does it feel the specific soul-shrinking pang of shame? This intricate social mirror we hold up to ourselves is a direct byproduct of our hyper-intelligence, our constant modeling of other minds. It is the price we pay for our community, our culture, our morality. But it is also a private wound that never fully heals, a whisper in the back of our own minds. If our intelligence is indeed this double-edged sword, the source of our dominion and our despair, then what does it mean to wield it wisely? Is the goal to become more, or perhaps to become less? A child, caught in a gentle act of mischief, buries their face in their hands. The room isn't cold. There is no shout of anger, no immediate threat of pain. Yet, the small body curls inward, the eyes squeeze shut, seeking refuge in a self-created darkness. This is not a learned reflex. It is a primal human echo. It is shame. Why does this complex, searing emotion, so different from the simple fear of a scolding, arise in us? What strange evolutionary bargain was struck that left our species, alone among the Earth's creatures, so exquisitely vulnerable to the weight of another's gaze? This feeling, so deeply personal and isolating, begins not in the soul, but in the intricate wiring of the brain. Deep within the folds of our prefrontal cortex, a region that grants us the gift of self-reflection and the curse of self-judgment, a specific neural orchestra tunes itself to the music of social opinion. Here, the dopamine system, that ancient chemist of desire and reward, also becomes the architect of our social pain. When we stumble, when we fail to meet an unspoken standard, it is not just an abstract thought that chastises us. It is a physiological event. The same pathways that light up with the pleasure of acceptance can plunge into a deficit, creating a visceral sense of lack, a craving for the reinstatement of our social standing. This neurobiological machinery is the hallmark of an advanced social consciousness, a mind that does not merely exist in a group, but is perpetually, painfully aware of its own standing within it. We are built to belong, and our brains punish us with exquisite precision when that belonging is threatened. Is this neural punishment the price we pay for the gift of community? Long before modern neuroscience, our ancestors were etching the story of their self-awareness into the very artifacts they left behind. The archaeological record speaks not of battles or grand migrations in its earliest, most intimate chapters, but of a quieter revolution, the birth of the social self. The first evidence of clothing, of beads crafted from shell and bone, of ochre used to paint the skin, is not merely a story of practicality. A simple animal hide provides warmth, but a carefully stitched garment, adorned with patterns, speaks of something else entirely. It speaks of a body that is not just a biological tool, but a social symbol. These are the first whispers of a creature that knows it is being looked at, that has begun to curate its own image in the eyes of the tribe. To decorate is to declare a self. To cover is to acknowledge that some parts of that self are private, potent, and must be managed within the gaze of others. The bead, the pigment, the needle. Were these the first tools not for survival, but for managing the terrifying and glorious burden of being seen? Did the first artist feel the prick of shame if their work was met with silence? In our modern world, this ancient emotion has been amplified into a powerful, double-edged social force. Shame acts as the invisible glue of civilization, a silent enforcer of norms and morals. It is the internal flinch that stops a hand from stealing, the hot flush that prevents a cruel word, the quiet guard that maintains the fragile contracts of trust that allow societies to function. It is the feeling that teaches us, more effectively than any law, that our actions ripple outward and affect the whole. We police ourselves, from the inside out, with this deeply uncomfortable emotion. Yet, this same glue can harden into a prison. When weaponized, when turned inward without reprieve, shame curdles into crippling self-loathing, anxiety, and a profound sense of unworthiness. It becomes the internalized voice of every rejection, every exclusion, every time we were told we were not enough. It is the root of so much silent human suffering. So, is shame the gentle guide that keeps us moral, or is it the invisible chain that keeps us in line? Can the very emotion that builds our communities also be the one that tears our individual spirits apart? This duality forces a deeper question. Perhaps shame is not a flaw in our design, but an inevitable consequence of our greatest evolutionary triumph. Maybe this capacity for social pain is part of the monumental price tag attached to our massive, energy-hungry brains. We traded the simple, instinctual existence of the animal for the complex, symbolic world of culture and connection. And with that connection came the terrifying vulnerability of being known and judged. We gained the world, but in the process, we lost the blissful anonymity of the beast. We stand naked, not just in body, but in spirit, perpetually aware of our own reflection in the eyes of others. But what was the nature of that initial bargain? What specific physical sacrifice did our ancestors make to power this magnificent and burdensome brain? Was it the trade of insulation for intellect? To cool the supercomputer of the human mind? Did evolution demand we surrender our own protective fur? A creature once blanketed in thick fur now stands naked under the sun. It feels the breeze on its skin, the warmth of a fire it made, the chill of a coming storm. This is not a loss, but a trade. A profound, ancient bargain struck with the forces of evolution. We surrendered our natural coat, our built-in armor, and in return, we were given something far more potent, a mind capable of dreaming, of wondering, of building worlds within itself. We traded fur for thought, a pelt for a universe of potential. But what does such a deal truly entail? And are we still paying the installments on this evolutionary debt? The story begins not in a palace of intellect, but on the sun-scorched savannas of Africa. Our ancestors were not the strongest predators, nor the swiftest prey. They occupied a precarious middle ground, and survival demanded a unique, almost absurd strategy: persistence. While other animals relied on explosive speed to catch a meal or avoid becoming one, early hominins discovered the power of endurance. They would simply outlast their quarry, tracking it under the relentless sun for miles, until the animal, overheating and exhausted, succumbed to its pursuers. This method, however, came with a critical biological requirement: superior cooling. A body covered in thick hair is an efficient insulator, a trap for metabolic heat. For a sprinter, this is fine. The chase is short. For a marathoner, it is a death sentence. And so, evolution began to sculpt. Over millennia, the dense fur receded, revealing a landscape of bare skin, a canvas now interlaced with a network of sweat glands far more prolific than any other primates. This was our first radiator, a biological innovation that allowed for sustained physical exertion without the risk of catastrophic overheating. The body could now run, and in running it could think, plan, and coordinate. The cooling system for the muscles became, inadvertently, the cooling system for the engine of the mind. This biological shift is etched not in stone, but in bone and the ghost of behavior. We can meet the architect of this new body in the fossil record, Homo erectus, the upright man. With a stature and body plan strikingly modern, Erectus was a wanderer, the first of our lineage to stride out of Africa and colonize vast, new, and unpredictable lands. This grand migration was powered by the new physiology. The evidence is not just in their skeletal remains, but in the implied lifestyle. They were hunters, yes, but hunters of a different sort. Their tools were not just hand axes for butchering, but instruments of patience. The archaeological sites whisper tales of long pursuits, of coordinated drives, of a species that could move and work under the sun for hours. Their survival was directly tethered to that hairless, sweaty skin. It was the key that unlocked the world, allowing them to be active during the heat of the day when other predators slept, to cover distances that would have been impossible for a fur-covered cousin. The body had been redesigned for endurance, and in doing so it created a platform for a brain that was beginning its own exponential growth. Was the expanding mind the cause of the naked skin, or was the naked skin the prerequisite that allowed the mind to expand? The trade, however, was a Faustian one. In shedding our fur, we gained a magnificent brain, but lost our innate protection. We became the most vulnerable creature on the planet. A naked ape, shivering in the cold, burning in the sun, exposed to the elements and the slightest scratch of a thorn. Our strength became our profound weakness. We are born unfinished, utterly dependent, our soft bodies requiring layers of artificial protection from the world we are built to dominate. This is the paradox of our existence. The very intellect that allows us to split the atom and compose symphonies is housed in a vessel that requires constant, meticulous care. We are forced to innovate simply to survive. Clothing, shelter, medicine, agriculture, these are not mere expressions of culture. They are the crutches for a biological invalid, the necessary prosthetics for a species that gambled its physical security for mental supremacy. Our entire technological civilization can be seen as an elaborate global-scale life support system for a hairless, fragile, yet brilliantly cunning ape. So, does this make us the planet's weakest species, or in our defiant technological rebellion against our own vulnerability, its strongest? The answer to that riddle might not lie in the individual, but in the space between individuals. Our weakness forced us to become specialists in each other. We could not survive alone. The trade was not just fur for a brain, but solitude for society. The individual is fragile, but the collective, the tribe, is resilient. This is the deeper layer of the bargain. We outsourced our survival to the group, and to manage that intricate, delicate web of relationships, to read the intentions of allies and enemies, to build trust and enforce cooperation, we needed a new kind of software for our newly acquired hardware. The brain did not just grow, it was rewired. It became a social brain, obsessed with connection, a hyper-specialized organ for navigating the most complex environment it would ever encounter, the minds of others. If our naked skin is the hardware upgrade that allowed the brain to overclock, then what is the software it runs? The code that compels us to turn to one another, to seek a face in the crowd, to find solace in a shared glance. Imagine a person alone in a forest. The backpack is full of provisions, dehydrated meals, a filtration system for endless clean water, a first aid kit, a sturdy tent. Survival, in the most technical sense, is assured. Yet days pass, then weeks. The body, well nourished, begins to fail in a different way. A profound lethargy sets in, not of the muscles, but of the spirit. The mind, untethered from the gaze of another, starts to unravel. The greatest threat isn't starvation or predation, but the crushing, suffocating silence of being utterly alone. Why? Why would a creature with everything it physically needs to survive simply wither away? The answer lies not in the body, but in the very architecture of the mind. We are not built for solitude. We are wired, on the most fundamental level, for we. This deep, biological imperative for connection is etched into our neurochemistry. When we share a laugh with a friend, embrace a loved one, or even engage in a moment of quiet understanding with a stranger, our brain responds with a potent cocktail of neurochemicals. Oxytocin, the so-called bonding molecule, floods our system, fostering trust and diminishing fear. Serotonin, the regulator of mood, finds its balance in social harmony. Dopamine, the reward signal, fires not just for personal achievement, but for shared triumph and social validation. This isn't mere pleasure. It's a physiological reinforcement system, as crucial as the one that drives us to eat or drink. To be isolated is to suffer a kind of neurochemical famine. The brain, expecting the nourishment of social feedback, starves. Is our need for others, then, not a soft preference, but a hardwired requirement for life itself, as primal as the need for oxygen? The story of our social dependency is written not just in our living cells, but in the bones of our ancestors. Archaeology offers silent, stunning testimony. In ancient burial sites, we find skeletons that tell stories of compassion that span millennia. A Neanderthal man, buried in what is now Iraq, whose remains show a withered arm, severe blindness, and a crippling limp. Ailments he must have lived with for years. He could not have hunted. He could not have foraged alone. His survival was a gift, given daily by his tribe. In another grave, a young child with a congenital brain deformity, who lived to the age of 5 or 6, cared for in a world without modern medicine. These are not outliers. They are profound evidence that our success as a species was never a story of the fittest individual, but of the fittest community. Survival was a collective project. Does this ancient legacy of care suggest that our strength has always been, and will always be, our capacity to carry each other? This ancient need has not faded. It has fractalized, evolving into vast and complex structures that define our modern existence. The family, the tribe, the village, these were our first circles of belonging. But the human mind, restless and imaginative, built bigger. We invented gods to unite us under a common celestial story. We conceived nations, binding millions of strangers with the fragile, powerful glue of shared myths, flags, and imagined histories. Today, we weave digital networks, vast invisible webs where we seek validation, connection, and community with a tap and a scroll. These are all superconnectors, monumental extensions of that primal urge to belong. The data is chillingly clear. Chronic loneliness, social isolation, is a mortality risk on par with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It shreds our immune system, corrodes our cardiac health, and hollows out our mental resilience. The body, it seems, agrees with the soul. We perish without the other. So, if our institutions, our technologies, and even our faiths are just elaborate expressions of this need, are we truly free individuals, or are we forever bound by the invisible threads of the tribe? This presents a quiet, unsettling paradox. If our brains are social organs, calibrated by evolution to thrive only in the reflective gaze of the community, then who is the true author of the self? We believe we are the captains of our own souls, making choices, forging identities, living for ourselves. But what if the very notion of a self is a collaborative fiction, a story we constantly draft and revise based on the anticipated reactions of those around us? Our tastes, our ambitions, our morals, are they authentically ours, or are they the internalized expectations of the tribe, the subtle programming of a brain that knows survival depends on fitting in? We wear clothes chosen from a menu provided by our culture, speak a language given to us by our ancestors, and pursue dreams shaped by societal definitions of success. Is this living for oneself, or is it a sophisticated performance of a role written by the collective? If connection is our cradle, is it also our cage? Perhaps the defining feature of our humanity is not our intelligence, our tool use, or our opposable thumbs. Many creatures share some of these traits. What truly sets us apart might be this profound, paradoxical ability to see ourselves through the eyes of another. It is the source of our greatest shame and our most profound empathy. It is the engine of art, which is a cry of, "Do you see it too?" It is the foundation of morality, the golden rule built on imagining ourselves in another's place. This reflective consciousness is what transforms a mere group of primates into a culture, a civilization. We are the animals who know what others think of us, and in that knowing, we are forever changed. But if our identity is a mirror held up by society, what happens when the mirror cracks? Or when it shows us a reflection we cannot bear to see? This incredible journey from the small, intimate band to the vast, imagined community of millions raises a final, lingering question. We built nations and gods to connect us, to make us feel part of something larger than ourselves. But in scaling up, have we lost the very thing we sought to create? We are connected to millions, yet we message into the void, craving a genuine response. We belong to enormous digital tribes, yet report epidemic levels of loneliness. We have mastered the technology of wide-scale connection, but perhaps forgotten the art of the deep, nourishing bond. The human brain, evolved for the campfire and the hunting party, now navigates a world of global markets and metaverse identities. It is still running on its ancient software, still seeking that hit of oxytocin, that confirming glance, that sense of being known. Can these vast abstract communities, these nations and networks, ever truly provide the intimate, visceral connection our Stone Age brains still crave? Or have we, in our ambition to connect with everyone, somehow risked connecting with no one at all? You are asked to die for a stranger. Not for your child, not for your parent, not for the friend who shares your food. You are asked to lay down your life for a person whose name you will never know, whose face you will never see, whose voice you will never hear. The request is absurd, a biological paradox. Every instinct for self-preservation should scream in rebellion. Yet, you might just do it. You might charge into gunfire, stand before a tank, or strap on a vest of explosives. Not for a person, but for an idea. For a flag, a border, a god, a story about who we are. This is the central magic trick of our species, the invisible architecture upon which our world is built. We live inside a shared dream, a collective fiction so powerful it can command the ultimate sacrifice. How did we learn to dream together? The answer begins not in a library or a parliament, but deep within the ancient wiring of the human skull. Buried beneath layers of conscious thought, two neural sentinels stand guard, the amygdala and the limbic system. They are our biological inheritance, a primal alarm system honed over millions of years. Their language is not words, but fear and affinity. Their command is simple: us and them. This, them, is a threat. That, us, is safety. This binary code is written in the very chemistry of our brains, a default setting that urges us to form tight-knit bands, to trust the familiar face and distrust the unknown. It is the club and the cradle, the foundation of every family and every tribe. It is the reason a mother will fight to the death for her child, and why a tribe will close ranks against the outsider. This hardware is real, tangible, and it craves a tangible target. It needs to see the us. So how did we leap from a tribe of 50 to a nation of 50 million? How did we convince this ancient brain to die for an abstraction? We did not rewire the machine. We learned to hack it. We found a way to speak its primal language using a new and potent vocabulary of symbols. We gave the amygdala a new us to love and a new them to fear. This hacking began not with a treaty or a constitution, but with a chant around a fire, with a painted handprint on a cave wall, with a shared gaze toward a carved stone figure. Long before the first city was built, we were building cathedrals in the mind. Consider the silent, stoic witnesses of our deep past, the towering monoliths of Stonehenge aligned with the cosmic dance of the sun and moon, the mysterious T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe, carved with a menagerie of beasts rising from the bare hills of Anatolia 11,000 years ago. These were not mere shelters. They were not built for survival. They were built for something else entirely. They are the first physical evidence of a new kind of thought. They required the coordinated labor of hundreds of people who shared no blood relation, who were united not by kinship, but by a common belief. What were they gathering for? What story was so compelling, so unifying, that it could convince hunter-gatherers to haul 20-ton stones across miles of countryside? The stones do not speak, but their existence shouts a profound truth. We had begun to bind ourselves together with shared myths. We had invented the first imagined communities. This capacity for collective fiction is the bedrock of all modern human collaboration. The us expanded, stretching far beyond the horizon of personal acquaintance. A nation is not a physical thing. You cannot touch it, smell it, or see it in its entirety. It exists because millions of people believe in their hearts that it exists. They believe in the same story of shared history, shared heroes, shared struggles. A corporation is, legally, a person, but you cannot find this person. It is a story agreed upon in law, a fictional entity that can own property, sue, and be sued, connecting the fates of a factory worker in Vietnam, a programmer in California, and a shareholder in London. The law itself is an imagined reality, a set of principles we all agree to abide by, giving a piece of paper with writing on it the power to dictate our behavior. These are the fictions we live by. They are the invisible forces that build hospitals, wage wars, send probes to Mars, and create stock markets. They are the reason you feel a connection to a compatriot you have never met and feel a pang of loss when a national hero dies. The fiction feels more real than stone. But here a shadow of a question falls. If these foundations of our civilization, our nations, our laws, our currencies, are merely shared illusions, are we then living a collective delusion? Is our grand society nothing more than a sophisticated mass hallucination? To call it an illusion is to misunderstand its power. An illusion is a falsehood. A shared belief, however, becomes a social fact. It is a reality that exists in the intersubjective space between minds. The value of $100 bill is not in the paper. It is in our collective agreement to believe in its value. That agreement can build a skyscraper or collapse an economy. The belief in a nation's right to exist can mobilize armies and redraw maps. These fictions are the most real and powerful forces in human history. They are the software that runs on the hardware of our social brains. They are not true in a biological sense, but they are truthful in that they produce real, tangible, world-altering consequences. So we are not living a lie. We are living inside a story. And the story is still being written. And like any story, it needed a way to survive its tellers. A belief trapped inside a single human mind is fragile, fleeting. It dies with the person, or it fades with a generation. For the story to become truly powerful, it had to break free from the confines of biology. It needed an external vessel, a place to live outside of us. The shared dream required a shared memory, one that was not stored in the soft, perishable tissue of the brain, but etched into the enduring stuff of the world. The first myths may have been whispered around fires, but to last, they needed to be carved into stone. The first agreements may have been sealed with a handshake, but to be binding, they needed to be impressed into clay. The dream needed to take physical form. It needed to become a thing we could point to, hold, and preserve. This was the moment our imagination became externalized, the moment we began to store our collective consciousness outside of our own heads. We began to build a mind beyond our minds. If our shared fictions are the software of civilization, what was the original hardware that first stored this code? What was the first object that allowed a human idea to outlive its thinker and be passed intact to another? What was the first artificial intelligence? It is an unremarkable stone, roughly the size of a human palm. Its surface is pocked and weathered, its color the dull hue of dried mud. To the untrained eye, it is just a rock. But hold it. Feel its weight. Notice how your fingers naturally curl into the grooves worn smooth by a mind that was not your own, by a hand that vanished over 1,000,000 years ago. This is an Herculean hand axe. It is not beautiful in the conventional sense, not intricate or polished. Yet, it is arguably the most transformative technology our species has ever devised. It was not a weapon, not merely a tool for butchering. It was humanity's first USB, a crude, Stone Age device for storing and transferring intelligence outside the confines of the human skull. The story of this axe begins not with flint, but with flesh. It begins with the limits of the human brain. We like to imagine our minds as boundless, but biology tells a different story. Our working memory, the mental scratch pad where we hold and manipulate information, is astonishingly fragile. It can hold only a handful of concepts at a time, a fleeting cascade of thoughts that vanishes as quickly as it appears. For our earliest ancestors, this was a severe constraint. How do you teach the art of survival? How do you pass down the precise angle for striking a stone to produce a sharp edge, the exact way to slice through tough hide, or the memory of a water source that only appears in the dry season? You could demonstrate, of course, but memory is fickle. A gesture forgotten, a detail missed in the dust of a hot afternoon, and a lifetime of accumulated wisdom could vanish in a single generation. The brain was a brilliant but terribly flawed storage device. It was a library with no shelves, where every book was constantly being rewritten and could be lost at any moment. What if knowledge did not have to be so ephemeral? What if it could exist outside of us? The hand axe is the answer to that ancient silent question. Emerging around 1.7 million years ago, it represents a cognitive Big Bang. Earlier tools were simple, opportunistic shards, a quick smash and grab. The Acheulean axe is different. It is a deliberate act of creation, a premeditated form. Its makers did not just find a useful rock. They envisioned a teardrop shape within the unformed stone, and then, with a series of calculated, skillful blows, they set that idea free. This process required not just strength, but a complex mental template. The maker had to hold that ideal shape in their mind, a blueprint of function and form, and execute it over and over. But the true revolution was not in the making, it was in the keeping. These axes were not discarded after a single use. They were carried, curated, and valued. They became external, tangible packets of information. The knowledge of how to make a perfect cutting tool was no longer just a neural pathway in one individual's brain. It was now an object. It could be held, studied, and replicated. A young hominin could learn not by vague memory, but by holding the finished product, feeling its balance, reverse engineering the creator's intent. The axe was a teacher. The stone itself had become a vessel for thought. Was this the moment technology stopped being a mere extension of the hand and became, instead, an extension of the mind? This act of externalizing thought launched us on a trajectory we are still riding today. The hand axe was the first step on a path that would lead to every technology of the mind we have ever created. The painted symbols deep within prehistoric caves were not just art. They were narratives stored on rock, a way to fix a story in time and space. The invention of writing was the next great leap, allowing us to capture speech itself, to freeze a fleeting sound into a permanent mark. This gave rise to libraries, vast, collective external brains, where the knowledge of thousands of individuals and generations could congregate. We did not need to remember every fact. We only needed to know how and where to find it. The USB drive and the internet are simply the logical, lightning-fast conclusions of this 2-million-year journey. We have built a global, interconnected mind, a distributed network of intelligence where our biological brains are just individual nodes. We no longer remember everything. We have created a world for memory to live in. But if our most crucial memories and knowledge reside not within us, but in the world we've built, where does the tool end and the thinker begin? This is the quiet paradox at the heart of our technological ascent. The very act of creating external crutches for our memory fundamentally changes what we are. We fear artificial intelligence as some alien force, but we have been constructing externalized intelligence since we first struck stone against stone. Our identity has always been a hybrid, a fusion of the organic mind within and the synthesized mind we have built around us. The hand axe was the first AI, the first artificial intelligence, in the truest sense of the word. It was an intelligence crafted by human hands, an external object that contained and executed a human will. It thought for us, in a way, by holding a thought we could not afford to lose. If the brain is no longer the sole repository of the self, then what is the boundary of the self? Is it our skin? Or does it extend to include the tools we hold, the devices we consult, the digital cloud we inhabit? Are we the rememberers, or are we simply the architects of memory? And this leads us to a question even more profound than the location of memory. If a memory can live outside the body, can intelligence? If a simple stone can hold a thought, what might a complex machine one day hold? We look at a hand axe and see a tool, but perhaps its maker, in some deep unconscious way, saw something else, the first fragment of a mind that would one day span the globe, a mind of which we are both the creators and, increasingly, a part. The stone does not provide an answer. It simply rests in the palm of the hand, a silent, ancient question. If intelligence does not reside entirely within the head, then where precisely does it begin? A melody once written exists. It sleeps on the page, a silent constellation of black notes on white staves, waiting. No instrument gives it voice, no audience receives its emotion, yet it is undeniably there. It is a ghost of a thought, a captured impulse from a mind that may have long since turned to dust. Whose intelligence is living within those lifeless symbols? The answer seems to begin with the composer, but it quickly escapes, spilling beyond the confines of a single skull. This silent score is a testament to a profound and uniquely human truth, that intelligence does not reside entirely within our heads. We have learned to cast our thoughts into the world, to build them a home outside ourselves. This externalization begins in the biology of our own bodies, in the intricate architecture of the human brain. Deep within the folds of our cortex, two regions became the workshops for this great escape. Broca's area, a small patch of neural tissue, dedicated itself not to raw sensation or brute force, but to the delicate art of articulation. It learned to translate the silent, swirling chaos of thought into the structured cadence of language, into nouns and verbs that could be passed from one person to another like a shared tool. Meanwhile, the parietal lobe, particularly areas dedicated to abstraction, began to perform a different kind of magic. It could take the specific, the memory of a particular bison, the shape of a single river bend, and distill it into an essence, a symbol. It could conceive of four, without needing four of any specific thing, of river, as a concept separate from the water currently flowing past. This was the biological breakthrough. The brain evolved not just to think, but to encode. It developed the machinery to translate the private, internal movie of consciousness into a format that could be exported. Our minds built their own translation software, and in doing so, built the first bridge to the outside world. Long before libraries or hard drives, the first pioneers of this external mind were leaving their marks on cave walls, their hands guided by those abstracting parietal lobes pressed against cold rock, tracing the outlines of the animals they hunted and the stars they navigated by. These were not merely pictures. They were the first external hard drives. A painting of a herd was a stored memory, a strategic plan, a teaching tool for the next generation. It was knowledge taken from inside one mind and made durable, shareable, outside of it. This impulse to externalize only grew more sophisticated. The Sumerians pressed cuneiform into wet clay, turning spoken agreements into immutable records. Ancient mathematicians in Egypt and Babylon invented symbols to represent nothing, zero, and everything, the complex relationships of geometry. These symbols were containers for pure thought, allowing ideas to be manipulated, combined, and transmitted with a precision that pure memory could never guarantee. Each symbol, each carving, was a vote of no confidence in the fragility of the biological mind alone. They were building a scaffold of intelligence that could outlive any single individual. Today, we live in a world built almost entirely from this externalized intelligence. Our internal mental space is a small, flickering candle compared to the blazing sun of the collective mind we have constructed. The note you jot down, the blueprint an engineer draws, the legal code that governs a nation, the musical score for an orchestra, the elegant logic of a computer program. None of these things are, in themselves, intelligent. They are static. They are ink or pixels or magnetic charges. Yet, they are frozen thought. They are intelligence captured and canned for future use. A single person could never design a skyscraper, govern a metropolis, or compose a symphony holding all the necessary details in their working memory. We overcome our biological limits by offloading our cognition into the world. We think with our notebooks, our calculators, our cultural archives. This vast and growing exoskeleton of knowledge is what allows human civilization to climb higher, building each generation upon the frozen thoughts of the last. The smartphone in your pocket is not a tool for a smart person. It is a component of your own mind, an extension of your very self into a digital realm. But if this is true, a deeply unsettling question begins to form in the shadows of this grand achievement. If our intelligence can be so readily extracted, bottled, and stored outside of ourselves, then where does our essential humanity actually reside? What remains uniquely us when so much of our thinking is done out there, in the world, in collaboration with the frozen thoughts of others? Is the self just the fleeting organic processor that interacts with this permanent library, a temporary user of a vast and eternal operating system? We have successfully distributed our intelligence across our entire civilization, but in doing so, we have fractured the ancient idea of the solitary, intelligent self. This dispersal feels like a liberation from our biological cage, but could it also be a kind of dilution? If a melody can exist without a musician, can a thought exist without a thinker? We have mastered the art of preserving the product, but have we lost sight of the process? The messy, warm, biological miracle of a singular consciousness? Perhaps the answer does not lie in what we know, but in how we choose to use that knowledge. And nothing illustrates this strange, paradoxical choice more clearly than our species' most mischievous ability: the lie. For it is one thing to externalize a fact, a truth, a design. It is another thing entirely to externalize a fiction, to craft a reality that does not exist and project it into the minds of others. This requires a breathtaking cognitive dance, a manipulation of the very symbols we created for connection. The same brain regions that evolved to share truth can, with a subtle shift, weaponize that same capacity. The same symbols that can build a bridge of understanding can also be used to dig a pit of deception. This suggests that our humanity might be defined not by the raw processing power of our brains, nor by the grandeur of our externalized knowledge, but by the choices we make within the space that this externalization creates. The lie creates a gap between the internal world of one person and the perceived world of another, a space of pure imagination and social risk. It is in this gap that we find not just intelligence, but intention, morality, and the complex dance of trust and betrayal. Our ability to externalize thought gave us civilization, but our ability to externalize fiction, to lie, may be what made us truly human. For what does it mean to trust when you know the person speaking holds not just the power to share their world with you, but to invent a new one entirely? The politician stands at the podium, a silhouette against a sea of flags. His voice, polished and resonant, fills the square, each word a carefully crafted stone laid in the edifice of his promise. You listen, and you know. You see the slight hesitation at the corner of his mouth, the fleeting micro-expression that betrays the calculated narrative. The words don't align with the records, the facts you've quietly unearthed in the dim light of your own inquiry. It's a performance, and you are one of the few who has read the script. Yet, all around you, the crowd erupts, not in skepticism, but in fervent applause. A wave of assent washes over the space, a collective agreement to a truth that is not, strictly speaking, true. Why? Why does the crowd clap? This is not a failure of intelligence, but perhaps one of humanity's most ancient and sophisticated successes. We are a species that knows how to lie, and, more astonishingly, a species that has learned to believe each other. This act of collaborative reality building is written deep within our biology. When we choose to deceive, our brain does not simply switch off its moral compass. It engages in a complex, energy-intensive dance. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of our executive functions and social conduct, lights up with activity, working overtime to construct a plausible alternative to reality. It must suppress the truthful response, manage the intricate details of the fiction, and simultaneously monitor the listener's reactions to see if the tale holds. Meanwhile, the anterior cingulate cortex, a region often associated with conflict monitoring and error detection, crackles with nervous energy. It is the internal whistleblower, the source of that subtle tension, the faint whisper that says, "This is not right." The very difficulty of lying, The cognitive load it requires suggests it is not our default state, but a high-order adaptation. We had to evolve the capacity for truth before we could invent the sophisticated machinery to subvert it. So, if lying is so hard, why did we get so good at it? Is the strain not just the cost of deception, but the price of building a shared world that transcends the immediate and the literal? The answer lies not in our modern courtrooms, but in the dust of ancient burial sites. Archaeology offers no clay tablets titled "The First Lie," but it provides something far more profound, evidence of a shared imagination. Consider a Neanderthal burial site where a body is laid to rest with tools and flowers. It speaks of care, perhaps of grief, but it operates in the tangible world of the present. Now, consider the later graves of Homo sapiens, where individuals are buried with elaborate grave goods, ochre, and symbols pointing to a world beyond this one. Here, we find the seeds of something new. These are not just tokens of remembrance, they are artifacts of a consensus. They are proof that a group of people agreed to believe in a narrative that could not be empirically verified. An afterlife, a spirit world, a meaning beyond the corporeal. This ability to rally around a fiction, to collectively invest in an idea that exists only in the shared space of our minds, is arguably our species' unique trait. It's the foundation of not just religion, but of law, money, and nations. A dollar bill is just linen and ink, yet we all agree it has value. A border is just a line on a map, yet we agree it is real. Was our first great lie not a malicious falsehood, but a story we told around a fire to bind ourselves together against the terrifying darkness? Our modern world is a cathedral built upon this foundational skill. The machinery of deception has simply been scaled up and turbocharged. Advertising doesn't sell a product, it sells an identity, a promise of a better version of yourself that hinges on a purchase. Fake news is not a new phenomenon. It is the ancient art of tribal storytelling weaponized by algorithms, feeding our pre-existing biases to create alternate, polarized realities. And even religious faith, for billions, operates on this same plane of accepting a premise that provides social cohesion, moral structure, and existential comfort, regardless of its empirical verifiability. They all run on the same engine, the suspension of literal truth for a higher social or personal payoff. We accept the minor deceit of a politician's promise because we believe in the larger story of his party or platform. We embrace the exaggeration of an advertisement because we desire the narrative of belonging it sells. Our world is woven from threads of agreed-upon fictions. So, if our entire civilization is built on a foundation of things that are not literally true, does that make them false? Or does it make them powerful? A reasonable objection arises from the chaos. If deception is so woven into our social fabric, why doesn't it all just fall apart? If everyone is lying, shouldn't trust be impossible and society crumble into paranoid dust? The counterintuitive truth is that low-level, pro-social deception might be the very glue that holds us together. We tell a friend their new haircut looks great, softening the blunt edge of our true opinion to preserve their feelings and maintain the relationship. We feign interest in a colleague's vacation story to promote group harmony. This is not the antisocial lying of the con artist. It is the oil in the social machine, a way of navigating the complex web of human relationships without causing constant friction. It is a performance of agreement that strengthens the collective. Perhaps society does not persist in spite of lying, but because of a certain kind of it. The real question then becomes not how to eliminate falsehood, but how to distinguish the glue that binds from the acid that corrodes. Where is the line between a lie that serves the group and one that destroys it? And just when we think we have mapped the geography of deception, through words, we discover a subtler, more primal language operating beneath the surface of our conversations. It is a sound that escapes us involuntarily, a spasm of noise and breath that we share with our primate cousins, yet one we have refined into a tool of immense social nuance. It is not a word, and it carries no literal meaning, yet it can reinforce alliances, deflect tension, and communicate complex social information in an instant. It is the soundtrack of our agreed-upon fictions, the punctuation mark on our shared narratives. It is laughter. What does it mean that our most honest sound is often used to navigate a world of unspoken truths? You hear it, a soft, almost breathy chuckle in the corner of the room. No joke has been told. No pratfall has occurred. Yet the entire group seems to understand, in that single, shared moment, that the person who laughed is casting a silent, subtle judgment. It's a social dart, feathered with amusement, that finds its mark without a single word of explanation. This is not the roar of shared joy. It is the whisper of a secret handshake, a quiet weapon in the endless, intricate dance of human connection. Laughter, we are told, is the universal language of joy. But what if its primary dialect is not happiness, but power? Beneath the surface of every genuine involuntary laugh lies an ancient biological machinery whirring to life. It begins not in the conscious thinking parts of our brain, but deep within the older, more primal limbic system, the seat of our raw, unfiltered emotions. This is the engine room of fear, joy, anger, and surprise. A spark of incongruity, a sudden relief of tension, and this ancient system fires. But the signal doesn't stop there. It races upward, engaging the premotor cortical areas, the regions that prepare our bodies for action. Our diaphragm spasms, our vocal cords contract and release in staccato bursts. We are, for a moment, hijacked by a physical reflex. Yet, humans are not mere puppets to their biology. The same laugh that originates in the emotional deep is then filtered through our most human feature, the vaunted cerebral cortex. It is here, in the intricate neural pathways, that the raw sound is fu, yu, yi, yi, imbued with social context. We don't just laugh, we decide, in a fraction of a second, how to laugh. Is it a belly laugh of pure abandon? A nervous titter to appease a superior? A derisive snort to align ourselves with one person against another? The simple, joyful reflex is thus co-opted into a sophisticated tool. It becomes a social lubricant and a social weapon, a way to broadcast our alliances and our animosities without the risk of a direct declaration. It is the biological cradling of a club. If we could listen to the echoes of time, what would the caves of our ancestors sound like? We will never find a fossilized laugh. No archaeologist will ever brush the dust from a perfectly preserved chuckle embedded in stone. The evidence for laughter's ancient role is written in more subtle inks, the invisible structures of social hierarchy. Among hunter-gatherer bands, survival was a group project. The strongest individual still relied on the group for food, protection, and warmth. In such a world, cohesion was currency. The storyteller, the individual who could weave narrative and levity, held a position of immense value. They weren't just entertainers, they were regulators. Around a fire, under a canopy of stars, the shared laughter at a well-told story did more than pass the time. It synchronized the heartbeats of the tribe. It dissolved the day's minor tensions and rivalries into a common, breathless experience. The person who could elicit this response wielded a gentle power. They could, through mockery, police social norms without confrontation. They could, through inclusive humor, strengthen the bonds that held the group together against a harsh and unpredictable world. Their value was not in their ability to hunt or gather, but in their ability to unite. In the dark, their greatest tool was not a spear, but a sound that made everyone feel momentarily the same. Was the first comedian, then, also the first politician? This ancient need to signal belonging has not faded. It has fractalized, evolving into a complex grammar of giggles, snickers, and roars that define our modern tribes. Today, we seldom gather around literal fires, but we huddle around digital ones. The meme, that quintessential unit of internet culture, is often nothing more than a visual punchline. To get the meme, to understand the layers of irony, satire, or absurdity, is to laugh on the inside. Sharing it is a collective chuckle, a way of saying, you and I are in the same group. We see the world through the same lens. It is a badge of belonging. Perhaps the most blatant modern exploitation of this impulse is the canned laughter of the sitcom track. It is a psychological nudge, an artificial social proof inserted into a vacuum. It tells us when to laugh, but more importantly, it assures us that we are laughing with a crowd, even if we are sitting alone in a silent room. It simulates the ancient fire circle, tricking our deep-seated social brains into feeling connected to an unseen tribe. From the boardroom to the bar, laughter continues to perform its delicate surgery. A shared laugh with a colleague seals an alliance. A scornful laugh directed at an idea can kill it before it's fully born. A nervous laugh from a subordinate acknowledges the power dynamic in the room. We are constantly reading the laughter of others, and they are reading ours, in a silent, continuous negotiation of status and affiliation. In a world of infinite choices, is laughter our ultimate shorthand for choosing sides? But this powerful tool has a dual edge, as sharp and as ambiguous as a finely crafted blade. If laughter can build bonds, it can just as easily manufacture them. What happens when this signal of alignment is divorced from genuine emotion? When the derisive chuckle is calculated to manipulate a group's opinion, or the sycophantic giggle is deployed solely to curry favor? The same laugh that can create a moment of pure, unscripted connection can also be a weapon of social coercion, pressuring others to join in or be marked as an outsider. It can be used to enforce conformity, to bully under the thin guise of just joking, to elevate one by diminishing another. This forces us to confront a deeply unsettling question. If laughter is not a faithful mirror of inner joy but a flexible tool of social strategy, can we ever truly trust the sound? Is the harmony it creates a genuine connection of spirits, or merely a clever manipulation, a way to orchestrate the crowd without their conscious consent? When we laugh together, are we sharing a truth, or are we participating in a convenient fiction? Does the echo of our collective mirth reveal who we are, or simply what we wish to appear to be? And yet, despite this potential for deception, we continue to crave its unifying power. We sense that a shared laugh is a tiny spark of shared intelligence, a momentary fusion of perspectives. But a laugh is fleeting. It is a reaction. When the challenge before us is too complex, when the puzzle is too vast for a single mind to solve, a chuckle of mutual understanding is not enough. We require something more durable, more structured. We need to pool not just our momentary amusement, but our cumulative knowledge, our individual strengths, our very consciousness. We must move beyond signaling our alliances and begin to truly merge our capacities. If laughter is the secret handshake, then what is the society it promises to unlock? If we can so effortlessly synchronize our scorn or our joy, what might we be capable of if we tried to synchronize our minds? The hunt begins not with a spear, but with a glance. A ripple of movement through the tall grass, a shadow too large for any one man to bring down. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and anticipation. In the minds of the hunters, there is no single, complete map of the beast, its habits, or the terrain. One man knows the way the wind shifts, how to stand so his scent carries away from the prey. Another holds the memory of the mammoth's migration paths, etched into his mind like river deltas on stone. A third has spent a lifetime feeling the balance of a spear, the exact grain of wood that will fly true and not splinter on impact. No one is the master of it all. Yet, as they move, a silent, seamless concert conducted without a conductor, they become more than the sum of their parts. They become a single, thinking entity. The mammoth falls not to a genius, but to a group. This ancient success whispers a question to our modern, individualistic souls. What if our greatest intelligence isn't housed within our skulls, but in the space between them? This is the quiet power of collective intelligence, the profound alchemy that occurs when incomplete individuals forge a complete whole. It is the answer to the puzzle of our species. How did we, physically weaker and slower than the megafauna we hunted, come to dominate the planet? The answer is not in our muscle, but in our ability to interlace our minds. We are a species built for collaboration, and this impulse is woven into the very fabric of our biology. Consider the simple, unexpected joy of watching someone excel at a task you cannot do. The carpenter who joints wood with a whisper, the programmer for whom code is a native tongue, the cook who coaxes flavors from the mundane. When we witness this mastery, something sparks within us. It is more than admiration. It is a deep, neurological recognition. A small wave of dopamine, the brain's currency of reward, washes through us not for our own achievement, but for theirs. This is the biological cradle of collaboration, a chemical reward for acknowledging that we do not have to be everything. We are wired to find pleasure in the expertise of others, to feel richer for the skills we lack. This innate cognitive division of labor is our birthright. Is our happiness, then, not just a personal state, but a social calculation, a reflection of the collective genius we are embedded within? The evidence of this ancient collaboration is etched not in scrolls, but in stone and bone. The archaeological record tells a tale of two kinds of intelligence. On one hand, the Neanderthals, robust, formidable, incredibly adept individuals. Their tools were effective, their survival for hundreds of thousands of years a testament to their individual prowess. Yet their world remained, in a sense, local. Their toolkits showed remarkable consistency across vast distances and millennia, as if the knowledge was bound to the individual. Then, there is our own lineage, Homo sapiens. Our campsites tell a different story. We see not just tools, but specialized workshops, evidence of trade in precious materials over hundreds of miles, implying networks of trust and exchange. The delicate, non-utilitarian artistry of shell beads and ochre pigments, a language of symbolism that could only have meaning within a shared group mind. The coordination required to drive a giant elk over a cliff is a feat of social and cognitive engineering far beyond the hunt itself. It was this ability to pool our fragmentary knowledge, to create a shared reservoir of skills and symbols that allowed us to burst out of Africa and adapt to every environment on Earth. The Neanderthals were perhaps the ultimate individualists, masters of their immediate world. We were the collaborators, the connectors, and in the end it was our collective mind, however nascent, that proved more adaptable. Did we win the world not by being smarter alone, but by being better at being smart together? This principle, born on the savannah, now builds our world. We live inside the cathedral of collective intelligence. Look up at a skyscraper piercing the clouds. No single mind could possibly hold the entirety of its creation, the geology of its foundation, the metallurgy of its skeleton, the physics of wind shear, the chemistry of its glass, the mathematics of its load-bearing curves, the electronics that bring it to life. It is a physical manifestation of fragmented knowledge synthesized into a breathtaking whole. The smartphone in your hand is a stone tool refined by 1,000,000 specialized hands across continents and generations. Modern medicine is not a single healer with a bag of herbs. It is a vast, interconnected web of radiologists, geneticists, immunologists, nurses, and engineers, each possessing a shard of the total truth, whose combined light can diagnose and heal. Our individual understanding has become profoundly narrow, a deep but thin shaft drilled into a mountain of knowledge. Yet, our societal intelligence is vast, panoramic, godlike in its capabilities. We have traded the ideal of the Renaissance man for the reality of the interconnected specialist. But in this trade, have we unknowingly built a world that no single one of us can ever truly comprehend? This is the central paradox of our success. We have created systems of such dazzling complexity that they operate beyond the grasp of any individual. Our global financial markets, the algorithms that curate our reality, the supply chains that feed nations, these are emergent phenomena of our collective intellect. They are powerful, but they are also alien. They have their own logic, their own rhythms, their own vulnerabilities. We are like the ancient hunters who successfully brought down the mammoth, but now stand before a creature of our own making, whose size and power we can harness, but perhaps not fully control. We are served by this collective mind, but are we still its master? Or have we, in our relentless specialization, created a force that begins to think for itself, following a logic that is distributed and thus invisible to any one of us? The same tool that is a cradle for progress can become a club of unintended consequences. If no one holds the map to the entire system, who is to say we are not lost within it? Perhaps the answers to these social puzzles are not always found in the waking world of action and interaction, but in the private theater of the mind after dark. For when the clamor of the collective fades and the individual succumbs to sleep, the brain does not simply switch off. It enters a state of intense, clandestine activity. It begins to run the tape of the day backwards and forwards, not to rest, but to rehearse. It weaves together fragments of memory, fear, desire, and social encounter into a tapestry that is often bizarre, sometimes terrifying, and always meaningful. This is the hidden laboratory of the self, the solitary workshop where the individual processes the overwhelming complexity of the group. And it makes one wonder, is this why we dream? Could these strange nocturnal narratives be the mind's essential training ground, its way of running simulations for the social challenges it must face upon waking? Is the dream, in fact, where the individual brain practices the art of living within the collective, preparing itself to once again join the hunt, to once again contribute its unique, imperfect shard to the brilliant, terrifying, and incomprehensible whole? If our waking life is an expression of collective intelligence, is the dream its essential private counterweight, the place where the individual self tries to make sense of the crowd? And what does it mean for our future? If the very organ that built the collective must now escape it each night just to learn how to live within it. You wake with a start, the ghost of an argument clinging to you. The sheets are tangled, the room is silent, but the anger is real, a hot, metallic taste in the mouth of your mind. Your partner sleeps peacefully beside you, innocent of the dream crime you're ready to accuse them of. The feeling is so vivid, so tangible, it seems to have mass and weight in the waking world. It defies logic. It was just a dream, a random hallucination, a misfiring of neurons in the night, wasn't it? To dismiss it so easily feels like a lie. That emotion, that raw, unfiltered experience, was as real as any you've had under the sun. What if these nightly visions are not mere mental static, but something far more significant? What if each night we enter a hidden laboratory of the mind, a private theater where the most profound experiments of the self are conducted? Within the dark, silent cradle of the skull, a spectacular biological light show is underway. We have slipped into the rapid eye movement phase of sleep, a state so peculiar it borders on the alien. The body is paralyzed, a life raft tethered to the dreaming mind, which is now sailing on a sea of its own creation. On a monitor, an EEG would reveal a brain blazing with activity, almost as if it were wide awake. But this wakefulness is a carefully orchestrated deception. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of our logical executive function, our inner critic and reality checker, is offline, quiet, and dark. Meanwhile, the limbic system, the ancient seat of emotion, memory, and instinct, is a fireworks display of neural electricity. The amygdala, our fear and emotion center, and the hippocampus, the librarian of our memories, are in deep, frantic conversation. This is the stage upon which our dreams are built. The brain is not creating something from nothing. It is a master composer taking the day's fragments, a face on the subway, a forgotten worry, a song on the radio, and weaving them into a symphony of meaning. It is replaying the raw data of our lives, but it is also remixing it, bending the rules of physics and narrative, all under the intense, distorting lens of pure emotion. This is not a random broadcast. It is a high-stakes simulation running on the most advanced hardware we know, using the only data it has ever had, us. In this state, is the brain merely sorting files, or is it running drills for a world it has not yet seen? Long before we had the language of neuroscience, we had the language of myth, and it was often whispered from the depths of a dream. Our ancient ancestors did not see these nocturnal journeys as neural hiccups. They were messages, visitations, prophecies. A dream was a crack in the world, a thin place where the divine could seep through. A king dreams of a ladder reaching to heaven, and a nation finds its covenant. A prophet dreams of a coming famine, and a civilization prepares. A Greek healer dreams of a serpent, and the symbol of Asclepius becomes the universal emblem of medicine. These stories, etched into clay tablets and scrolls, form the bedrock of our cultures and religions. They were not considered private hallucinations, but public, communal property to be interpreted by shamans, elders, and oracles. The dream was the original oracle, the first muse, the unseen architect of temples and the silent author of laws. The community would gather to listen, to decipher the cryptic symbolism, and to weave the dream's narrative into their rituals, their art, their very understanding of the cosmos. The dream was a shared reality, a collective subconscious speaking to the tribe before the concept of the individual self had fully solidified. Were these visions merely the brain's internal processing, accidentally birthing the gods? Or did the act of sharing and ritualizing them fulfill a deeper evolutionary purpose, forging social cohesion through a shared, mysterious narrative? The modern lens offers a compelling and perhaps unifying theory. This ancient oracle, this biological simulator, might be our personal nocturnal training ground. With the prefrontal cortex quieted, the social inhibitions and constant self-monitoring that govern our waking hours fall away. In this space, we can run the scenarios that are too dangerous, too costly, or too taboo to practice in the light of day. That argument with your boss, that flash of attraction to a stranger, that surge of primal fear, the dream world allows us to play them out. It is a social laboratory where we can simulate risk, navigate complex emotional currents, and confront the shadow versions of ourselves and others, all from the safety of a paralyzed body. Here, we can scream at a loved one and observe the emotional fallout without causing real-world damage. We can flee from monsters and feel the adrenaline surge, honing our threat response systems. We can rehearse conversations, confront buried traumas, and untangle knotted feelings. The intense emotion you felt upon waking from that argument wasn't a flaw. It was the point. The experiment was a success. The brain was stress testing a social emotional scenario, and the feeling was the data. Is the primary function of dreaming, then, to be a safe playground for our most complex social and emotional algorithms, a space where we can continuously practice being human without any real-world consequences? This elegant theory, however, presents a profound paradox. If dreams are so vital, such crucial training exercises for the mind, why does the system seem so flawed? Why do we forget the vast majority of them almost instantly upon waking? It's like meticulously conducting a life-altering experiment, only to immediately burn the lab notes. The fragments that survive are often nonsensical: a talking fish, a melting clock, a childhood home with endless new rooms. If this is a vital evolutionary tool, surely natural selection would have favored those of us who could remember our lessons clearly, who could wake and jot down the insights gleaned from the nightly simulation. The very impermanence of dreams feels like a design feature, not a bug. It suggests that the value may not reside in the conscious narrative, the story we can later recall and recount. The talking fish is not the lesson. The feeling it evoked is. Perhaps the content is irrelevant, even distracting. The true work happens beneath the surface of awareness. The brain is not processing the story of the argument. It is processing the raw emotional residue of the conflict, decoupling it from the specific memory, and filing it away in a less volatile form. The forgetting is the curtain closing. It protects us from confusing the simulation with reality, from living in a perpetual jet lag of the soul, half in one world and half in the other. So, was the real purpose of that angry dream not to show you a fight with your partner, but to allow your mind to metabolize the emotion of anger itself, leaving you, the conscious self, unburdened by its specific narrative? This leads us to a tentative observation, a single slice of a much larger truth. The ultimate function of this hidden laboratory may not be about processing the past, but about preparing for the future. It is the mind's way of learning to look back at itself, not to dwell, but to better see the path ahead. The dream is the crucible where memory and imagination fuse. We take the clay of our lived experiences and we begin to sculpt possibilities. This ability, to project ourselves backward and forward in time, to mentally time travel, is the cornerstone of human consciousness. It is a ability rarely, if ever, observed in other primates with such complexity. Our ancestors did not just dream of gods. They dreamed of better tools, of new lands, of different ways of living. The dream was the first workshop of innovation. So, if the dream state is where our brain practices being itself, where it runs its most vital simulations using the data of the past, then what is it truly building for tomorrow? If we can journey through time in our minds, rehearsing what was to imagine what could be, then is the dream not the very engine of our becoming? And if that is so, what future is your mind, in its silent, nightly laboratory, tirelessly trying to build for you right now? You close your eyes, a scent, a fragment of a melody, and you are there, not in the room where you sit, but in a kitchen from 20 years ago, the light slanting a certain way, the sound of a familiar voice now silent. You linger there for a moment, a ghost in your own museum. Then, the mind pivots, effortlessly. You are picturing yourself 5 years from now, in a city you've never visited, a version of you that is both familiar and utterly unknown. 2 different directions in time, 2 separate journeys, yet both are happening in the very same place, the intricate, silent universe within your skull. This is our unique faculty, our birthright and our burden, the ability to travel through time without moving a single muscle. This mental time travel is not some vague, mystical process. It has an address, a physical reality, deep within the temporal lobes of your brain, nestled like a seahorse, which is what its name, hippocampus, means, an intricate dance of neurons fires. This ancient structure is the cartographer of your personal history, meticulously mapping the events of your life. But it does not work alone. It is in constant, whispered conversation with the prefrontal cortex, the brain's sophisticated planner and strategist, located just behind your forehead. Together, they perform a magic trick. When you remember your first day of school, the hippocampus retrieves the sensory fragments, the smell of wax crayons, the weight of the backpack, while the prefrontal cortex helps stitch them into a coherent narrative, a story you call memory. Remarkably, this very same neural partnership activates when you imagine a future event. To dream of a conversation you hope to have next week, the brain borrows the same raw materials, the scent of coffee, the feeling of a handshake, the sound of laughter, from your past, and weaves them into a new hypothetical tapestry. The same loom is used to weave both history and prophecy. The past is a database, and the future is a simulation run on that data. So, if the same machinery is used to look backward and forward, does that make memory less of a recording and more of a rehearsal? Long before neuroscience, we were leaving evidence of this dual impulse in the dust and darkness of caves. On the walls of Lascaux or Chauvet, ochre and charcoal bring aurochs and horses to life in a stunning, dynamic parade. For decades, we saw these as simple records, a hunter's pride etched in stone, a depiction of a successful past. But what if we have been reading them wrong? Look at the composition. The animals are often layered in motion, pierced with spears. This could be a chronicle of a great hunt, yes, or perhaps it is something else entirely. Perhaps it is a prayer, a vision, a hope for a hunt yet to come. The artists might have been projecting their future onto the rock, attempting to manifest abundance and success through depiction. They were not just saying, "This is what we did." They might have been pleading, "This is what we must do." In the flickering torchlight, the boundary between the remembered past and the desired future would have blurred, the animals seeming to breathe and move, a collective dream shared by an entire community. Were these caves our first cinemas? where we gathered not to watch stories of what was, but to preview stories of what could be. This ability to run these complex mental simulations is the engine of human progress. It is what separates a worry from an instinct, a plan from an impulse. We do not merely remember that fire burns. We can simulate the consequence of touching a flame before we do it, and thus we withdraw our hand. We do not just recall a harsh word from a friend. We imagine the potential fallout of a comment we are about to make, and sometimes we choose silence. This is the incredible power of our prefrontal cortex. It allows us to build what-if scenarios. We can test drive conversations, pre-live presentations, and rehearse difficult goodbyes. This is the foundation of empathy, of strategy, of culture itself. Yet this glorious tool has a shadow side. This same machinery is the factory of anxiety, which is, at its core, the relentless simulation of negative futures. It is the inability to stop running the worst-case scenario on a loop. Our greatest gift is also the source of our most persistent pain. If our peace of mind depends on the simulations we choose to run, are we then the programmers of our own suffering? But this leads us to a quieter, more disorienting thought. If both our past and our future are constructed, built from sensory fragments, shaped by our present emotions, and edited by the very act of recollection and projection, then what is truly real? Your memory of that childhood kitchen is not a perfect video file. It is a story you have told yourself, edited over the years, faded in some places and sharpened in others, influenced by every telling and retelling. Your vision of your future self in a new city is a collage of movies you've seen, books you've read, and people you've met. They are both phantoms, elegant and persuasive simulations rendered in the virtual reality of consciousness. So, if our past is a narrative and our future is a draft, are we all living inside a story we are constantly writing and rewriting for ourselves? Is the self merely the central character in this ongoing self-generated saga? And then, from this profound and unsettling ability to simulate realities that are not present, humanity took a step that seems to defy all pragmatic logic. We began to use this power not just to remember the hunt or plan the harvest, but for something seemingly useless. We began to chip a piece of flint not only to make it sharper, but to make its lines more symmetrical, its form more pleasing. We began to daub patterns on walls that served no clear purpose of warning or instruction. We began to arrange sounds in sequences that did not signal danger or food, but that caused a strange swelling in the chest. We began to craft beauty for its own sake. There is no straight evolutionary line from a sharp tool to a sonnet, from a sturdy pot to a painted vase. Utility did not demand it. Survival did not require it. Yet we did it anyway. We journeyed from the necessary to the beautiful. What does it mean that a creature whose mind is built for survival would suddenly turn its greatest tool toward the creation of something as utterly, magnificently pointless as a song?